Oh.
Nope, not virtual. Welcome to my vintage living room in Old Allendale.
There you go. There you go.
And
Turn
you're
into
live.
century
We
wallpaper.
are now streaming.
Perfect. Thank you. I will now call the Finance and Corporate Services Committee meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. Welcome everybody to our virtual meeting. Due to COVID-19 pandemic physical distancing measures, the committee is meeting virtually. Members of the committee, executive management, city clerk, and support staff are participating via video conference, as well as senior leadership team that are not visible but are available to answer questions on the agenda items if we need be. Open delegations was number one on our agenda, and as our only registered deputant is not here yet, we will move on to presentations. And as the clerk said, if they do.
Sorry to interrupt, Councilor Morales. She is now online.
That is okay. Perfect. So we will stay on open delegations. Let me know when Ms. Clark can hear us.
Oh, take mute off. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Clark, we can hear you.
Okay.
Perfect. So we've got just the one open delegation, and that's by Ms. Myrna Clark concerning traffic noise and speeding vehicles on city streets. I will now call upon you, Ms. Clark, to provide your open delegation. Just please know that in accordance with the city's procedural bylaw, you'll have 5 minutes to provide your comments. Go ahead, Ms. Clark.
Thank you. Thank you to the city staff for rescheduling this appointment after a few delays, mostly due to COVID, but in order for me to address this committee with my deep concerns about speeding and excessively noisy vehicles on Barrie streets. I will mainly be addressing speeding, yet I do believe addressing the speed one often finds accompanying modified, noisy, attention-seeking vehicles as well. The goal of this presentation is to have the committee consider increasing, or if it's the police responsibility, the number of photo radar sites throughout Barrie to decrease the number of vehicle-related injuries and deaths. My quest over the past 16 months has been to try and decrease the level of speeding in order to make our streets safer. I do want to acknowledge, however, that there are many pressing and serious issues that our police are dealing with to keep us safe during this time. However, this careless flaunting of traffic laws started well before COVID and seems a modern privilege and entitlement that is difficult to understand. I came tonight to seek further input from this committee as to what can be done, and also offer a few suggestions to curtail this dangerous driving behavior. Over the past 16 months, I've spoken with my counselor and members of the Barrie Police who have both been very responsive and polite. However, I do not see any change in the number of speeders in my neighborhood and across the city. Over the weeks and months before and during COVID, after speaking with my counselor and the police sergeant, when I found no change in driving patterns in Barrie, I wrote letters to the local news media, 4 times actually over the course of several months. As stated, the sergeant in charge of traffic has always replied to my emails in a polite, respectful manner. The sergeant also added that there is a question of deployment. I understand that there are many issues in the city currently, and I'm requesting that we increase the focus on traffic safety, as it is an issue that affects us all. Over the weeks and months, I occasionally phoned the non-emergency police number to report what seems to me to be speeding vehicles. The dispatcher asked if I got a license number. This task is not possible, however, when someone's traveling very quickly past my house, if I'm even outside on my veranda, or sometimes in the middle of the night when I'm inside. And I understand that the dispatcher must ask me for a license plate, but it's simply not possible to get. Barrie streets are not safe. This is a vehicle-dominant city. It's normal to see these vehicles push through the end of yellow lights turning red. Well, sometimes they are completely red. I have had a truck pass me on a residential street on the inside lane, which is actually a bicycle lane, because I wasn't traveling fast enough for him. I believe increased radar presence and speeding ticket issuance would help contribute to a safer place for us all. By not treating this irresponsible, dangerous behavior with a more concerted intent, the safety of the citizens of Barrie streets has become worse. There have been several vehicle accidents this summer involving death and serious injury, where news reports have said speed was an issue. I've asked the sergeant on a few occasions, why is speeding not of more concern? He's told me they're doing their best. He mentioned about the blitz for modified noisy vehicles in June, where they gave out 51 tickets. Yet the problem persists, and I've tried all the options I can think of: counselor, police, letters to the media, speaking to neighbors and friends across the city. So when I contacted the city, this was my next step, and Tara referred me to this committee. Yes, I'm frustrated and also angry and discouraged that there's been little to no change in the dangerous driving habits of several people in Barrie. So tonight I asked this committee to consider the use of photo radar, as Toronto has recently done, because their problems are great also. Speed in the excessively noisy vehicles with modified exhausts continue to be ever dangerous. There must be a kind of word on the street that speeding is okay in Barrie. Of course, we cannot expect the police to catch all these noisy vehicles and riders. Some are motorcycles, but surely an increased radar presence and significant fines could deter most and send a message. As to the excessively noisy vehicles with modified exhausts, beyond manufacturer guidelines, they should be given significant fines and 48 hours to remedy this or stay off the road until they do. Increased presence of photo radar should address speeding. As well, it would also address the noisy, attention-seeking drivers, as they often go together. Thank you for listening. Any comments or questions?
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Clark, for your delegation. Are there any questions from members of the committee? I think I saw Deputy Mayor Ward's hand. I just have to cycle through the grids here. Now I know the patience the mayor has.
I didn't actually, but if I could ask a question, it's actually maybe I can get the representatives of the police on our police board to answer the question. What from their perspective?
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. That would go to Mayor Lehman and Councillor Thompson, I believe.
Yeah, it sounds like a tough question. So Councillor Thompson can answer it. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, Myrna, for the deputation. Yes, Operation Noisemaker was conducted this summer, and it was actually the first blitz that the Barrie Police's dedicated traffic unit had done on modified aftermarket vehicles and so forth. They were very prominent in posting the results of that on social media to attempt to deter others. I think for both speeding and noisy vehicles, as I know you've heard the response from the force, it is simply a matter of priorities. And I would tell you that we know from the numbers of PONs, provincial offenses notices, the majority of which are traffic tickets, that enforcement level was lower in the first few months of COVID. And then has rebounded significantly. And actually, I've forgotten, Rob may remember whether it was August or September was the highest month in the last 2 years for PONs. I think the reality of it is it does depend on the pressures that are on our police force. And, if we expanded the force, added officers and cruisers to the traffic unit, we would catch more speeders. I think the force tries to balance that priority with all of the pressures facing it. But if I can just add an editorial comment, I would tell you that I've noticed exactly the same thing. First of all, a huge increase in the number of aftermarket noisemakers on cars. And secondly, an increase in speeding behavior. And it was, I think, very telling that in April, the Barrie Police arrested or charged somebody with stunt driving. And he actually said, and they publicized this, oh, I didn't think you guys were out enforcing traffic laws right now. Mm-hmm. And that was COVID. I think there was an assumption that our emergency services were completely wrapped up in addressing COVID in some way. And of course, that was never true, but it did put pressure on them and it did drive down the enforcement levels, especially in the worst months of the spring. So I guess if there's an assurance I can give you, it's that both Councillor Thompson and myself at every meeting continue to ask about both PONs and the speeding issue, because it is the #1 complaint from our residents. And I appreciate your continued advocacy. Sorry, one other note I should, and then I'll hand over to Councillor Thompson. It would be good, Deputy Mayor Ward, maybe after Rob makes his remarks, we could go to the CAO and just ask about the red light cameras and the photo radar in school zones, as that is a live file. But Councillor Thompson, I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Actually, through the chair to Ms. Clark, I was just going to say that we are waiting on a report for the red light cameras through the CAO. They're doing a study, and there's been a little bit of a change in the technology. It was owned by a municipal government, where there's some agreements being made to expand it to other municipalities, sorry.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Mr. Prowse, is there anything that you'd like to clarify on Councillor Thompson's comment? And then I'll go to Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Chair Morales. Councillor Thompson is correct. Council should expect a report from the Traffic Operations Department. I would say relatively soon. There's been some movement in the industry, and there's a long outstanding request from Council, which goes actually back a couple of years, but there has been recently some movement on that. So I would expect that there'll be an update in front of Council, hopefully by the end of this calendar year.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Prowse. Councillor Jim Harris, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. Clark, for your presentation and interest in safer streets. I will say, and I think you were trying to make your point, but Barrie streets are not safe. I would say it might be, a little large, and I will say this because one of the really important initiatives that was entered into last year at the City of Barrie and the Simcoe District Health Unit was to encourage children to walk to school. I know a lot of work was done in neighborhood assessments to make sure that walking to school was safer, which is a really important piece of well-being. We had a presentation last night for well-being that focused one of the projects about walking to school for children. So, but certainly, having said what you said, I think it's important. I'm just curious. Obviously, it's really good to have data. There's a perception of speeding, then there's reality of speeding. On the streets that you're most concerned about in your area, have you had radar speed boards located there, and do you have data on the actual speeds?
I have no data and I have not seen them. Young Street, I can almost hear from my house, and I have neighbors on the Big Bay Point, Dean Avenue in that neighborhood, and they can hear. But I haven't seen anything. Hearst is like a highway often. That's where I get past sometimes if I'm not going fast enough. No, I have not seen. And then I guess I'm just thinking back. I mean, I'm an older citizen. I grew up in Toronto, and photo radar was tried at one point, and people didn't like it, and I'm not sure why. So you don't necessarily need to deploy a human officer, which is way more expensive. So I don't know if that's an option. I know Mayor Lehman made that suggestion. I read it in the paper in December, and the Minister of Transportation at the time, I think it was Carolyn Mulroney, said we had to warn people or put up signs to warn people, which I thought, why do we have to warn people to obey the law?
Okay, perfect. Councillor Jim Harris, do you have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, again, thank you, Ms. Clark, certainly. And maybe that would be a suggestion. I know there's interest around this table at council of increasing a number of radar speed boards. And although they don't give infraction information, they do give good information on the data and the reality of the speeding. And they have been shown to be very effective at slowing speeds. So when we see that digital sign, it cues us to be aware of, oh my goodness, I'm going 55, I should be doing 45. So I think that's a tool you might want to use, for your area to get some data. And I know, Councillor Harvey, if I could make a question to you, Chair, to Councillor Harvey. I mean, you're in the business, obviously, of policing, and you've seen some of the tools. I don't know if you want to comment. I know you've been an advocate for radar speed boards and their value for reducing speed.
Thanks for putting me on the hot seat there, Councillor Harris, as I wasn't expecting this. Yeah, like, I mean, I'll be quite honest with you. No matter what municipality you go into, this is a common concern. I know in my just over 3 decades of policing in another municipality, many times when we do attend an area when people believe vehicles are doing 70, 80 kilometers an hour, and we sit there with a radar gun showing them the true speed of the vehicles, a lot of times what they believe is 70 and 80 kilometers an hour is a lot of times in that 60 to 65 type of range. Like, I mean, they're still speeding, but they're not at that level that a lot of people believe it is. And until you actually have the device in your hand, it is difficult to truly know what speed a vehicle is actually moving at. And you can't go off your speedometer either, because every vehicle is calibrated so that way it doesn't register the true speed, because no manufacturer wants to be responsible for a vehicle showing a speed when in fact you're doing an extra 5 or 10 higher than that. So typically everyone's speedometer is actually several kilometers lower than what you're truly going. But you did make a good point about the LED radar boards. They are very effective. There's a lot of data behind it that shows that they're effective. Mapleview near Essa Road in my particular ward, for instance, is a very known hotspot where I could personally see that people were doing way more than 60 kilometers an hour. And it has been very effective, because that's the latest location that I've got one of the boards at. So it'll be interesting to see the data when they do forward it to us. But there was a lot of good concerns brought up by Ms. Clark, and unfortunately, there's certain restrictions around what the police can and cannot do also, because like when it comes to a noisy vehicle, unless it's unsafe, you can't pull a vehicle off the road. So giving somebody a ticket for a noisy muffler, there's actually not even a specific section that deals specifically with that. It's just in generalities about a noisy vehicle. The only time you can actually give someone an offense for a muffler is when you can prove that it has been either bored out or hollowed out, and they've done some modifications to that exact muffler. Which, like, I mean, you literally got to crawl under the car and bang it with an object to know that it's been hollowed out. But so there are some constraints. It's not quite as black and white as many would think. And one angle that she might think about doing is potentially reaching out provincially to see if some of these guidelines could be changed, because the Highway Traffic Act is a provincially mandated law.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Jim Harris, do you have any follow-up on that feedback?
Well, yeah, I just want to say thank you, Councillor Harvey, for not being prepared. That 30 years sure paid off. That's a lot of good information. So thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Clark, for, I mean, all of us councillors, we receive a most common concern is speeding and cars. And so thank you for raising our awareness of this and for the attention you're giving it.
Thank you, Councillor Jim Harris. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Councillor Alwyn?
I believe Deputy Mayor Ward as well, but I'll be quick, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions since I'm not a member of the committee. Ms. Clark, we've been talking a lot about sort of the downstream solutions to speeding and noisy vehicles, and I'm interested in your thoughts on some of the upstream solutions. Would you support a blanket speed limit reduction on residential streets within the city?
It's been tried in Toronto that they lowered the speed limit on quieter streets. I don't know how successful. I think it can't help but have somewhat of a decrease and an awareness of speed. Yeah, I think I would support that. That sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know there was a bit of a public conversation at the beginning of this term of council around this idea, and it didn't really go anywhere, but perhaps we can have that conversation again and look at it again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alwyn. Deputy Mayor Ward, sorry I missed you. I'm just switching back between the grids.
Nope.
And then I've got Councillor Natalie Harris.
Just picking up on Councillor Elwyn's point, I think that Barrie has a motion that says we're in favor of lowering the speed limit. We need provincial approval to do it. We need a provincial law to let us lower the speed limit. Otherwise, as I understand it, we'd have to put a sign up on every single street to say it was 40. If we wanted to, we'd have to pass a bylaw and lower it to 40. To blanket lower it to 40, I think that's provincial legislation. Is somebody give me direction on that?
Ms.
Whether
McAlpin,
we can't do it as a city, we need the province to do it.
I do remember this conversation a bit. Ms. McAlpine, I'll start with you. I think I might go to Ms. Miller, but I feel like this sounds familiar.
I'll have Ms. Miller correct me, but at this point in time, the Highway Traffic Act, based on my recall, is any particular lowering limits is on a street-by-street basis. If a municipality does it, the province can, on the request of a municipality or at its own direction, lower them on a blanket basis. But the municipality would, as Deputy Mayor Ward indicated, if you wanted to do a blanket one in the city of Barrie, you would actually need to sign every single street to be able to do that, because we don't have that authority to do it that way. Ms. Miller can correct me if there's something that's more up to date that I'm not aware of.
Ms. Miller?
Not that I'm aware of, Councilor Morales.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Councilor Natalie Harris.
Oops, I just had a couple of other quick
go
points. Yeah.
Deputy
One
Mayor.
is on the photo radar. I guess it wasn't quite clear where we stand on that now. If it's something that's being investigated by police or not. And I'll agree. I mean, the current way that photo radar is allowed in Ontario, it's almost useless in my mind. You can only put it in school zones. You have to put up a sign 90 days in advance and advertise that you're going to be putting a photo radar there 90 days for 90 days. And then you put up the photo radar. Then you want to put it somewhere else, you got to put up a sign for 90 days. I mean, it's just impractical. Having said that, I think if we don't do it, we're kind of signaling to the province that, yeah, we're not interested. I think it's important to at least use this first step and maybe getting a better provincial law down the road. But I guess it wasn't clear. Is it something the police are looking at in Barrie? Or the city looking at? I'm not sure who makes that decision on radar.
Mr. Prowse, I'll just kind of go to you for clarification on that.
Thank you, Chair Morales. Through you to Deputy Mayor Ward. The carriage of that staff report actually is with the Operations Department, Deputy Mayor Ward. There has been a logjam, I would describe it, on information over the last couple of years and the practicality of it. But Council will be receiving a staff report back on the options and merits around photo radar and community safety zones for their deliberation, as I indicated, probably within the next couple of months.
Perfect.
Is that joint photo radar and red light cameras, or they're separate reports coming?
The report I'm speaking to is the photo radar in the community safety zones. I believe the red light cameras was a staff report received by Council several years ago where no action was taken.
There's nothing going on in the red light cameras then right now. Okay.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. One last question, and maybe once again, and I'd love to see, especially the blitz on noisy mufflers, and maybe even a citywide blitz on speeding drivers. Is that something the police have ever considered to do? Like they did last year in June, earlier this year in June with the noisy mufflers. Have they ever considered a citywide crackdown on speeding? I mean, it's ongoing, but send a message out there by actually making a blitz and making everybody aware that it's an issue.
Mayor Lehman, go ahead if
Sure.
you can start.
So Deputy Mayor Ward, again, as has been often referenced, it's an issue of literally how many cars you can put on the road. There's a deployment model that says we need to have cruisers and officers in all areas of the city to be able to respond to all the other calls, the criminal calls and the emergency calls. So even with every other car we've got and overtime, there would not be a very significant increase in the number of officers that could be deployed at once. They do this at the start of school. So as you probably remember, there's a school safety zone blitz that occurs in the first half of September. They just finished doing that again this year, where they set up in the driveways of elementary schools and in the area of schools around the city to remind drivers that they're there and sort of blitz speeding in school safety zones. But again, if we're willing to pay for the overtime for the officers, if we're willing to buy more cars, I'm sure the chief would say that we could do more traffic enforcement.
Okay. Just one last point I wanted to make. I know that there was a study came out last year from an insurance group about where the worst drivers were in Ontario based on the tickets and collisions. And two of the top 5 in Ontario were in Simcoe County. Neither one was Barrie. Bradford and Aurelia both made the list. Orangeville, I remember, was the worst community in Ontario. And Toronto, Mississauga, and Brampton were the best drivers in Ontario, which probably would come as a shock to a lot of people, but that's what the statistics found. Anyways, interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Chair Morales. I just wanted to share some information that I have learned. I was in contact with the traffic officer Brooks prior to him moving, and now it's Officer Allport. And one of the things I had also inquired Councillor Aylwin about the blanket lowering of speed limits. And one of the things that he had brought to my attention was if it isn't on a 1-lane street. So for example, if we lower the limits on Ferndale Drive, which is where I would have loved that, they actually also saw aggressive driving happening. So people were trying to pass more often than not at times. So that was something I had never heard of before. It was interesting information. And another thing that, obviously I always have lots of requests for for radar, for actual officers to be performing speed radar. And one of the interesting facts I learned was that the new apps that are available, like Waze and etc., where they show you where the radar is, really affects the length of time that they can even be at that radar location, because everybody knows they're there as soon as someone puts it on the map. I don't know how that works. I actually don't even have that app. But that was something that was really interesting because I didn't know, that's technology these days that is really affecting the way that we're able to, or the police officers are able to enforce that. So thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Natalie Harris. I know Ms. Banting is listening, so hopefully we can capture those comments, insights, and look into them further. Do any other members of committee or members of council? Good point, Councillor Aylwin, earlier. My apologies to Deputy Mayor Ward. Does anyone else have comments or questions? I'm scrolling. Oh, Councillor Kungl, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Morales. And through you to staff, I guess it's an observation out of some of the commentary is specific to the red light cameras. So my understanding is that we've got a report coming back for the photo radar in a couple of months, and then the red light cameras are separate. But on, I think, your note, Deputy Mayor Ward, while we talked about certain areas around traffic safety, I think we also had some ranking that was published a while ago around top 5 most dangerous intersections in Barrie that had collision data, I believe. So I'm not sure if we're looking at that, and potentially, if we do look at red light cameras, if we're using that type of data and information, if it has integrity around, where we might test out or pilot red light cameras in the city. So does that need, hearing that report was done years ago to council and it didn't move anywhere, is there an intention for that to kind of be raised again and relooked at? So just wondering about the process, I guess, to do that, and if there's enough evidence, and so maybe I'll direct it to staff. Is there enough evidence that would legitimize kind of a, Georgian Drive was, I believe, one of the top 2 areas for most collisions by the college and hospital. And so what would be a next step if we wanted to reinvestigate the justification for a couple of red light cameras and costing that?
Is that to Mr. Prowse, Councillor Kungl?
I just mentioned to staff around who is best maybe to identify if there is data on hand, and or not being a voting member of Finance Committee, if that's a dated report. I mean, would it be asking staff through voting members of this committee to actually pull that report and then reinvestigate?
Okay, I'll send it to Ms. Miller and then we'll go from there. Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Chair Morales, through you to Councillor Kungl. Certainly, if there is a desire for the traffic services branch to take a look at those areas, that we can certainly do that at your direction. We don't currently have anything coming back on the red light cameras. As Ms. McAlpine indicated earlier, that report had already come forward several years ago, and there is no further direction on that. But we do, as part of our overall work program, take a look at collision data, intersections that have problems, and adjust accordingly.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Councillor Kungl, does that answer your question and other questions?
Well, I guess for my next step, then I personally would be interested. I'll look to you, Chair Morales, or staff to identify if my best next step would be then to take this to general committee and ask staff to pull that report and use best available evidence to identify if there's justification for a pilot based on evidence we have around high collision areas on certain traffic stops across the city.
Okay.
So unless otherwise directed, I'll assume to take that to general committee as an inquiry to staff.
Thank you, Councillor Kungl. I'll just make one quick comment, then I'll ask for one more time and we'll try to move on the agenda. I know there's a couple people waiting. For new members of council, so anybody who started in 2018, some of the presentations, reports that they're referring to, Ms. Cook, maybe we can send it to council. I do remember a very detailed presentation by Ms. McAlpine, where she said the cost of the tickets, the enforcement, the fact that in some areas where you activated red light, it actually increased accidents because people tried to slam on the brakes. So it was really it's a presentation from 3 years ago, and I still remember it. And Mr. Steve Rose did the where the highest collision streets are. So Ms. Cook, if on a timely basis, we can get this to all members of council, but specifically new members of council, they can digest that material. And then if Councillor Kungl or anyone wants to take that further, they now have the information that we're ambiguously referring to. Is that okay? Perfect. Okay. So are there any other questions on this? I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay. Ms. Clark, thank you so much for your presentation, your patience. And I know you've been involved in the Barrie community for a very long time. So I commend that work that you've done. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. We are now moving on to presentations. Members of committee, acknowledging the fact that we have guests on the presentation from Cornerstone, as well as staff. I'm going to just reverse the order so Cornerstone can present first. Do any members of committee have any objections to that? Okay, I see no objections on that. So the presentation is by Cornerstone to Recovery concerning the registered charity, Cornerstone to Recovery, and their community recovery programs. I'll call upon Mr. Blaine Hobson to provide the presentation. Mr. Hobson, you have the Zoom floor. Your mic is muted.
It's going to work a lot better. Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time tonight to meet with us. I'm going to attempt to put the presentation up for everybody, and so give me a moment and we'll see how well this works. Stand by.
Worst case scenario, I believe, Ms. Cook, I got that. Yeah, we got that a couple of days ago, but I'll let you work this technology.
How about that? It worked. Can everybody see that screen?
Yep, all good, Blaine.
Yes.
Hello? Okay, lovely. Okay, I understand we have about 15 to 20 minutes, so I'm going to jump right into it. We may not directly follow the PowerPoint. It's mostly there to provide background information, but very quickly, who we are. Cornerstone is a publicly registered federal charity, which means that that all of our financial statements and all the information about the charity is publicly listed on the government website. And so we are very, very transparent in what we do. We began in 2004, and we began with a simple concept, which was that that recovery cannot be based upon treating symptoms of a problem, but requires that you deal with the underlying issues of a problem. And in this case, the problem is addiction, mental health. And in 2004, we began with the concept of building a community, a recovery community. If we kind of move along to the timeline, you'll see that we started in 2004. There was a gap between 2004 and 2009, during which we built the first step of our community, which was the social enterprise. It was important to us that we be self-funding and self-supporting. And so we spent the first roughly 4 years building a social enterprise, which would allow us to fund our activities and to be self-supporting and standing on our own feet. We'll get more into what those social enterprises are, but in 2009, we were sufficiently financially strong that we were able to open our men's residential facility.
Mr. Hobson, I'm just going to jump in. Two things. We're still on slide 1. I don't know if on your screen it's moving. Maybe it froze on Zoom, or maybe you just need to click on something.
No, it was moving.
It was moving on your end?
Yeah, I told you I was going to not be good at this. Oh, there we go. It's working. Is it moving now? You're seeing it?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
moving.
thank
And just the other thing I just wanted to clarify, I'm just touching base here. As per the procedure bylaw, the presentation is 10 minutes. There's obviously time for follow-up questions, all that. So
okay, I'll go even faster.
I'll give you an extra couple minutes just on that clarification, but just we have to adhere to the procedure bylaw. Thank you. Go
I
ahead.
understand. So in 2009, we opened up a men's residential facility. It's a 10-bed facility in Kettleby. That is a program which we'll get into in greater detail, but effectively it's a 90-day men's residential facility where we begin people into a program of recovery based upon fundamental changes of lifestyle. In 2016, we were able to then open the Recovery Community Center. And just as the Jewish community or the Polish community has a community center, so does our recovery community. And it is exactly what you'd expect in a community center. It is a place where people can meet and share their needs and their interests. And in this particular case, their recovery. By 2018, we had grown to the point where we needed to change. We were originally called Steps. And Steps, and our logo was men marching. We had reached the point where we understood that we needed to expand past being simply a 12-step organization because we were now interfacing with different levels of government and the medical community. And we also needed to change the logo because we had given the wrong impression that we only dealt with men's issues. And with the community center open, we engaged in a number of women's programs and community programs. And so there was a rebranding. 2019, we opened the Wellness Center. And a wellness center is what you would expect in a community center where we bring other aspects of our program to our community. They would be things like yoga and mindfulness and acupuncture, all the way out to kind of fun things like Zumba and CrossFit and those sorts of things. And with that opened, we now had a safe, supportive environment into which we could introduce women to our community. And so in 2020, we made a decision that we would open a women's residential facility. That decision was to open the facility in Newmarket, where the other rest of our facilities are. It was that point that we were approached by a number of members of Barrie's council to consider opening it in Newmarket, and in fact, opening our first satellite and to replicate our model in another town. And we were very, very encouraged by the concept of being able to seed the first Cornerstone community in another town with the support of a partner. And that was new to us, and we were very encouraged by that. Because we only have 10 minutes, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide other than to tell you that each of these sections, pathways, connections, wellness, residential, they're all the pieces that are necessary to create a whole solution from how you live to how you work to how you interface socially to how you get past the emotional and mental issues that are associated with addiction. And they all rest on social enterprise. And that's really important because if we go up to the next, social enterprise for us has 2 or 3 different businesses. We have an actual working farm. We have an electronics recycling business. But the one that was going to impact Barrie was, in fact, the textile recycling business. And we had a conversation initially to come into Barrie with a simple proposition, which is that if you would allow us to run a textile recycling operation in town, it would provide sufficient revenue for us to be able to build our women's residential facility in your town. As we all know, COVID has come along and changed the world a little bit. And we have, been delayed partly because of the COVID crisis. And as a result, we have now come to a modified version. The reason I've popped these pictures up here, it's important for you guys to recognize that we run these programs with other towns. The town of Markham, the town of Aurora, the town of Newmarket, the town of Stouffville. We operate in conjunction with the town. These are very, very good programs for the town because they divert a huge amount of waste from your landfills. They save the town money in terms of your tipping fees. They reduce your overall carbon footprint. And just in and of themselves, they provide a huge advantage to the town. But in this particular case, they also will provide funding for a service which will reduce your hospitalization costs, reduce your police costs, and hopefully provide a better and more hopeful solution to that portion of your population which is affected by addiction. Quickly speaking about the Cornerstone residential model, it is very, very different from what you would traditionally think of as a rehab. Rehabs have a tendency to be kind of a short stay. They focus very, very heavily upon a program of having a beginning, a middle, and a defined end. And they tend to focus on behavior modification, which, we can get into arguments as to the effectiveness of that, but I prefer not to. What we do is very, very different. We have a beginning and a middle. There is no end. Once you become part of our community, you are part of our community for life. We will, of course, provide all of the certified counseling and support. All of our counselors are board certified. And there is a very structured program during the 90 days that you are physically in our residential program. But all of our counselors are also experience lived. All of them have got a chip in their pocket. And so when they talk about a way of life, they are speaking from experience, both experience lived and from having the necessary training and credentials. Our residential program is 90 days. It includes group family counseling, community activities. There is perhaps the biggest difference of what we do in our program is that each and every piece of your day is structured around a learning and a behavioral change. We don't have chefs cooking you meals, and we don't have people making your rooms for you. There will be structured work programs where you will not only just take care of yourself, but really, really important that you will contribute back to your community, because it is only through the opportunity to develop self-confidence and self-accomplishment only comes through your own efforts. And I think it makes us very different from other approaches. I won't get into a lot of detail around success statistics, because unfortunately the statistics in the market, because this is a very big business, tend not to be believable. I can tell you that, we track statistics which we don't publish, but we use for our own internal, what you can't measure, you can't manage. And I can tell you that our success rate is substantially higher than anything I've ever heard of. I'm going to jump past this because we're short on time, just simply to say that we do have 24/7 support and that all of our counselors are certified and board certified and qualified. Program cost is really important. It costs us about $15,000 to $20,000 a guest. We ask those residents who have money, have the ability to pay $7,500. It is a contribution to the community. That $7,500 certainly goes towards deferring costs, but it also goes into a community fund. People leaving from our programs need to get a restart. And if you don't have first and last month rent, if you don't have a driver's license, because there's a lot of fines on it, we will loan you the money interest-free. And as you recover, we hope you'll pay it back. And frankly, about 70% do. Those who do not have money, it's free. And that is supported through our social enterprises and through contributions of our community. I think we've talked about what sets us apart. We are community-based treatment, reemployment, life training skills, moving people all the way through our program and into work at the end is really important to us. And the fact that we heavily subsidize it so that we can provide access to everybody is essential. And I guess perhaps to reiterate it, it is ongoing. The people that are part of our community are part of our community for life. And there is no end to what we begin with them. I'm going to give you just a very quick touch on the addiction epidemic. I don't think anybody needs education on it. It is, at this point, killing far, and we're talking about that which is trackable, which is the opioid crisis, is killing far more people than COVID. But that is really not a very good statistic, because the fact is that it leaves out all of the car crashes. It leaves out all of the people who fell down the stairs, the people who die of horrible deaths of addiction from cirrhosis and mental illness and suicide. This is an epidemic which has actually lowered the life expectancy in Canada. And it's just hard to overstate just how serious this is, and it's growing. And to make it worse, it is a gender-based crisis. The reality is that women are stigmatized. There are lots of barriers. Children's aid services will prevent women from asking for help for fear of losing their children. A lot of the women have had violence issues, domestic abuse, sexual abuse. I guess to make it even worse, there is no difference between the number of women and the number of men who have addiction problems, but there are 1/3 the number of beds available for women, and there is not a single not-for-profit option. So although this is going to be a much harder job, the fact that it's hard is not a reason for us not to do it. We are passionate and motivated to take on this mission, which brings us to our partnership with Barrie. We are talking about putting in a 14-bed residential treatment program and a 6-bed transitional housing program. Women have a bigger issue being able to relocate and find housing after they have gone through the program. So it's important that we put them in hand in hand. Again, it'll be 24/7 based. All the original elements that have worked so well for us, but we will be specializing in particular issues that are women's based. I should tell you that Peter Brewitt, who heads up our programs, director of programming, has had experience in building a women's center before, and so we do understand the gravity of that which we are about to undertake. Very quickly, we have a total $3.4 million budget. We have a $2.4 million capital budget, which includes purchasing the building and about $400,000 worth of renovations. It is our intent to make certain that we have subsidy in place for the first 4 years. And by that, what I'm referring to is simply it takes a while for recycling operations to kick in. It takes a while for the house to fill, for the cost to settle down. And it's important for us that we know when we're starting that we have the ability to be successful all the way through. That's pretty essential to us. And so we are today here talking to the city of Barrie and Cornerstone about a partnership. And I really think it is a win-win partnership. As I said before, we will divert, our estimate is approximately 2 million pounds from your landfill. We will reduce your carbon footprint and we will provide a valuable service to your town. When we initially came to you, we were not asking for capital. Because of COVID has dramatically affected our social enterprise and its cash flows, we are asking the city of Barrie for a $400,000 capital support, which is effectively would allow us to finance the renovations, allowing us then to free that money up to finance the ongoing continuous support to make certain that this is successful. I'll turn it over to questions now.
Thank you, Mr. Hobson, on that. IT, I don't know who removes the presentation. I can't see anybody right now.
I'm going to try, but again, hold your breath. I'm not certain. Can somebody else figure out how to do that? Oh, wait a minute. Got it.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Hobson. Anybody have any questions or comments from members of committee? I'm scanning. We've got Deputy Mayor Ward. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hobson, for the presentation. I guess my first question is it strictly a residential program? It's not day counseling at all. It's all residential?
No. So the first step, and I should have put this in, sorry, I rushed past it. In opening up a women's residential facility in Barrie, it is only our first step. Our intent will be to build a full Cornerstone community in Barrie, which means that we will also be building a men's residential facility and we will be putting in a community center. Our initial thoughts around the women's residential facility, though, is that we will have to offer both a residential program and day programming. There will be women, because they have children that they cannot give up into custody, who will be able to find daycare for them so they can come 4-day program, spend the day with us, have all our meals with us, but they won't sleep over. They'll return to the children. So that absolutely will be part of what we're going to be doing.
Okay, 2 more questions. One is, do you have a property in mind already, or is it something you're still looking for?
We have 2 properties which we've narrowed down on, both of which would be very, very suitable. And we are prepared to move fairly quickly once we know we have a go.
Okay, last question, it's a biggie, is have you approached the County of Simcoe for funding?
I have not.
Okay, I assume you're not going to limit this to Barrie residents. I assume if somebody comes in from Elmville or...
frankly, if somebody comes in from British Columbia, they'll...
Yeah, I'd really encourage you to go to the county as well for funding. It's probably going to get a better reception in the city of Barrie if we know that the county is also putting in money. Just piece of advice. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. Any other members of committee have any questions? Councillor Harvey.
Actually, it's just one quick question, and it's actually just to feed off what Deputy Mayor Ward just spoke of. Not only the county, but have you had any discussions with our local MPPs or MPPs down in York Region, where you're originally from, to seek some funding provincially? Because this type of thing does actually come under a provincial mandate when it comes to financing this type of social service that you're talking about. Like, I mean, it's great what you've explained, but just wondering what other avenues you've explored to be able to fund what you're looking for.
Mr. Hopson?
Yeah, so just to be clear, we've never gone and gotten government funding ever. We've always marched on our own efforts and on our own behalf. We are in the city of Barrie because the city of Barrie approached us. We didn't come to the city of Barrie to say, let's set up here and would you guys want to attract us? And so we've gotten to where we've gotten because of our conversations with members of Barrie Council, different people that are on council. There has been lots of discussion with different councillors about them helping us to approach both the county and the province to bring funding on board. Were that to occur, it would accelerate our ability to then bring a men's residence and to bring a cornerstone club. In other words, a complete community to the city of Barrie. But it probably shows, but we've never gone to government before and never asked for money. And I find it difficult, frankly, to even be here asking for it. So I apologize if I'm doing a poor job of it, but no, I haven't.
Councillor Harvey? We're good?
That's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Oh, I don't know why my video froze. Councillor Rietmag.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. I have a question for Mr. Hopson. Thank you for your submission. What happens to the textiles that you collect?
We're in a partnership with a textile recycling company that actually operates out of Barrie called Talese. And so there's a very large Talese store in town. And we have been operating, they have been operating a pilot project in your town to do curbside collection of textiles. And so together, what we're going to be doing is, rather than going out to having 30 and 40 bins around your town, it is a much reduced ask, which is that we have 6 or 8 government sites, your town sites, that would be collection points, and we would work in conjunction with Talese to continue to do curbside pickup.
And a follow-up to that, there are a lot of secondhand stores that handle used clothing. In your experience, what's the impact on, the Missions thrift store or the Value Village? What's the impact on them from us moving to a situation like you're suggesting?
I think it's very positive, frankly. There is an association called NACTR, which is National Association of Charitable Textile Recyclers. I am on the board of it. So is Salvation Army, so are Diabetes. We have worked together in partnership in the town of Markham, Diabetes, ourselves, and Ontario Federation of Cerebral Palsy. We are in partnership in Newmarket and Aurora with Diabetes. So everywhere that legitimate charities are working with towns is very, very, very positive. People aren't aware, but about 60 some odd % of all textile recycling is done not for real charities. It's actually done for profit companies who do not have insurance, do not license their bins, do not ask permission from the real estate owners. And so all of the legitimate charities together work to see whether or not we can enter into these relationships with municipalities in order to be able to both help the municipality reduce its footprint and simultaneously bring real benefit to the community from the good of it.
Do any of these textiles go overseas?
Yeah, they do eventually, not all of them. What ends up happening is that they go through a sorting process. Some of them will be sorted and resold locally. Some of them will be sorted and turned into industrial products. So anywhere that you are in a factory and you get wipers, wipers are made from resorted textiles that are then cut up into being used as effectively grease rags and wipers. Another group of it is separated out, and when you open the hood of your car and you have that heavy sound barrier that's underneath the inside of it, that's called shoddy. That's made out of recycled clothing. Generally speaking, footwear and t-shirts will end up going over to the third world.
Okay, thank you. It's just we've had a report on the pilot, and one of the comments in that report is that we will need to, in order to meet our bylaws, go to a competitive bid sometime next year. Is that something that you're okay with? And sort of a connection to that question is you're asking for us to work with you on the bins, and then you're asking as well for a cash amount. Is it both, or is it one or the other? Can you live with only one, or do you need both? I just want to, I don't want to negotiate with you in public, but I want to just understand where you're coming from.
Mr. Hobson, just before you answer that question, Councillor Rietma, could you just clarify the first portion of your question? Are you aware that in a year to meet operations, we have to go to a public bid? And also know that there's staff here to answer that, to maybe provide clarity. Just the question was a little ambiguous and I didn't quite follow it, but I think I know what you're talking about. So I just want to make sure Mr. Hobson is clear on the question and that we have staff confirming the timelines of your question.
Actually, thank you, Chair Morales. I think that is a very good point, and perhaps we could ask someone from staff to just clarify what the process needs to be. That's a very good suggestion. Thanks. So maybe Ms. Miller or Mr. Prowse could answer that.
Chair Morales, through you to Councillor Rietma, the memo that you are referring to, Councillor Rietma, is in fact from our business performance and environmental sustainability team, and it does reference the pilot program that we do believe is a success. And if our final report continues in that vein, we would be recommending that we go out to bid. The memo does reference the fact that as per the procurement bylaw, we are required to sole source, or we are required to go out to competitive bid. However, the procurement bylaw does provide a clause that if council directs, there could be a non-standard procurement. And I'm sure that Ms. McAlpine can further expand on that if you require it.
You're on mute, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rietma. I think that answers the first part of your question. If you want to re-ask and the second part of your question or a reiteration of your question to Mr. Hobson, I'm sure you can now.
Okay, yeah, the second part of the question simply was, you've asked for, permission to work with us on the bins and for a cash injection. Is it, do you need both, or if you get one, are you okay to do without the other? Just give us some idea as to where you stand on that.
The way that the program is put together, it would put it at risk to have only one. In order for us to come to Barrie, it will increase our costs. It will increase our administrative effort. At the very least, you can imagine we'll be hiring a full-time bus driver to move people back and forth until we've got a proper Cornerstone Club built in Barrie. So yes, in order to be able to put this facility into Barrie, I will require both.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Thank you, Councillor Rietma. Members of council, I'm just swiping the grid again. Councillor Jim Harris, I've got you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me through you to Mr. Hobson. Mr. Hobson, thank you for the presentation and for the work you're doing to support individuals who are in recovery from substance use and addiction. I really admire your work. Just curious, and this you've shared, it's your first time asking for government funds at any level. But I did hear a couple of recommendations at both county level and provincial level, and I did hear correctly that you were interested in pursuing those as well. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, we have been talking to a couple of people in Barrie Council who made that suggestion to us and said that they would Sherpa our efforts. And were we able to achieve support at the provincial level or the county level, that would allow us to be able to accelerate the growth program for Barrie, and to be able to move the rest of the Cornerstone community up in terms of schedule.
Okay, so that was kind of what I was curious about, was would that other level of government investment and involvement serve to reduce the ask of City of Barrie Council, or would it serve to accelerate the other elements of the program?
Well, so the difficulty would be that if we start linking these one to the next, I suspect I will still be here a year from now talking to you about a program that I wanted to start building last year.
Yeah.
And so, this is really simple for me. I want to go forward with Barrie. I think it'll be a wonderful partnership. But if it becomes enmeshed in lots of bureaucracy, then I'm going to have to go back and remember why we didn't ask government for money before.
Right. So I'll leave that be. That I guess what I will say is I do appreciate, and you identified the need for women's treatment facilities. So that's very, very important in understanding that ask today. Does the operations in Barrie require all three levels, such that I know we're not going to get ahead of ourselves, but so you're happy to proceed with the women's shelter? It doesn't have to be a guarantee that there's the other Cornerstone facilities come with it, but that certainly is the understandable goal. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I would say to you, it's not a shelter. Shelter is a bad term.
Pardon me.
It's a residential home. And so, yes, for the short term, we can bring the people from Barrie. It's not that long a trip down to Newmarket to participate in our programs at that Cornerstone Club. But the reason that we're doing this and why we're excited about coming to do this in Barrie is it's the ability for us to, for want of a terrible analogy, the sourdough starter, to be able to start another Cornerstone community. Because as we begin to build this in Barrie, we will continue to build the one in Newmarket. It'll be put off, but we will begin to get into a situation where we can replicate a model. And if we can have a model whereby municipal and private can be together in a way which is self-supporting, we're not looking for ongoing support here. It's a one-time, setup cost kind of an arrangement. Then to me, that's very exciting, because I've spent 18 years building this thing, and to see it have the ability to now take on its own life and to take partnership with like-minded individuals is why we're here today.
Great. Thank you very much for answering my questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Jim Harris. Any other members of any comments or questions from members of committee? Members of, go ahead, Mayor Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know we have a full agenda, and the memo will come up shortly for discussion after the other presentation. But I know there are. It is my intention to introduce a motion at that point in support of Cornerstone. But that would be when we get to the memo on the textile item. I did want to ask Mr. Hobson only one question, and that is, you were. I think modest, sir, in talking about your fundraising to date for this, and I just wanted to clarify what you're proposing to Barrie Council. My understanding is you're proposing to invest $2 million in our community to build a residential treatment facility, and in fact, it's another $1 million on top of that, which the organization will take on as financing cost on your own dime. So this is you're proposing a $3 million investment in Barrie to build a residential treatment facility, and that's on the capital side. Have I got that right? It's $2 million in philanthropy and then additional funding.
That is correct, and I can also assure you that at this point we actually have the full $3 million. In place. So it's not, we get your go ahead and then we're going to go out and see how we can do.
Yeah.
We have the capital.
Yeah. Okay. So the capital's ready to go, and you really need a decision from us to know whether you're going to build this facility in Barrie for the benefit of the addicted in Barrie, or you're going to build it in Newmarket. And to clarify the numbers, because I know this will be important, the 400,000 in support in the form of a grant or a loan is leveraging your $3 million investment. We're just talking money here. I've got that right?
When you say leveraging, please clarify.
Well, you're making a $3 million investment. You're asking us to make a $400,000 investment to make the $3 million
that is correct.
To get to the complete project budget. Yeah. Okay. Then the second piece of this, which is a social enterprise which provides work for the participants in the program. So not only are the members of the program receiving addictions treatment, they're actually working in the social enterprise, which helps generate the revenue required to fund your services and to allow people of all income levels to access that service. So there's no operating ask of the funding of the City of Barrie. You are self-funding through your own social enterprise. That's the case.
That is correct, and have been for 18 years.
Quite the track record. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Congo, is that a hand? Yep. Okay, Councillor Congo, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Morales. To the presenter, I've lost you on my screen. There you are, Mr. Hobson. Very, very informative, and I think, and I'll thank you as well, Mayor Lehman. I think your points helped to address some questions that I had. I do have a couple. I have several, but I think those are more logistics that I'm eager to kind of understand offline around the program. But I wanted to check in around reference to 2 sites that are potential, with the capital ask of the 400,000 that I believe was related to finance renovations. Could you speak a little bit about those 2 sites, and if that 400,000 is seen to be appropriate for either site, or would you be returning to the table for a different ask depending on the site selected? So that's kind of part 1.
No, we will not be returning to the table for a different ask.
Okay. And part 2 of those sites, and I haven't had the privilege of walking through your current operations in Newmarket. Are those sites, is that site once chosen intended to be able to be fully operational in the future to expand and to also be the men's treatment center, or will there be different sites, different infrastructure for your community center and then your men's center?
Yeah, so not to be indelicate, but it's suicide to put a men's center and a women's center beside each other. There are so many confused sexuality issues that will come up. So no, we will never put a men's residential facility. They'll see each other, they'll meet each other at the club, but it's cohabitating is a very, very, very bad idea.
Yeah, I wanted to appreciate when we talk about one location, but a multi-pronged approach to your expansion, then what your intentions were, so that helps to clarify.
Okay. It's likely that it will be at least 2 buildings and possibly 3 when we're finished in Barrie.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh,
sorry, go ahead, Councillor Kungl.
Yeah, and I'll wrap up into one last question. Could you speak at all to the management model? So as we look at your expansion into Barrie and your operations, and knowing that you've mentioned some impacts with COVID around revenue generation, I wasn't sure if you could share so I could better appreciate. You mentioned an estimation of about £2 million in textiles that would be supported through 10 bins on city property. Is there a projected revenue that you're looking that would generate at minimum that's supporting kind of a base operations?
That wouldn't be information which we would share. We don't get into the actual cost of collection, cost per pound, all that kind of thing, because clearly that's competitive information. And as a public charity, if you look up, you'll see what our operational costs are for our social enterprises. And so you can divide it by the 2.2 million pounds we currently divert and come up with a number on your own, but it's not one which we publish.
Okay, and I'm more asking that, and not to jeopardize any corporate information, but more about, should we see COVID expand? Can you speak at all to the impact you've seen around textile? Although our pilot program has been successful, I understand from staff, but if that's going to be seen to be, is that the main revenue generation that will support the Women's Treatment Center? And if it doesn't go that well, hypothetically, would any money that would be earned through the Barrie located bins actually be redirected to support your Newmarket part of the business? Or would it be dedicated to the Barrie area?
Yeah, it would be hard for me to be able to separate which came from where. You know, when you're talking about costs in Newmarket, all the costs of management are going to be in Newmarket. All of the costs for running the community center will be in Newmarket. All the costs for running the wellness programs that they're going to be involved in, all the costs for the family counseling. So it would be very hard for me to say, well, these are Barrie costs, because in fact, when we put this together, it's a little bit, you know, made into a pie, and it's hard to tell what berries came from where. But I think that I can assure you that more money will be spent in Barrie than will be taken out of Barrie. How's that?
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure my assumption is the ask about the bins, should we go through procurement and that be a piece that's established, that there is no term on that relationship, that is kind of an evergreen arrangement, or would it expect it to be an evergreen arrangement to ensure sustainability of revenue?
I think that is a term which still needs to be ironed out and finished up. I understand that there might be a requirement for an RFP, and if there was, as long as it contained the same sort of social benefit and demonstration of social benefit, then we'd be able to live with that. If it's simply a hey, come on in and everybody throw their stuff in, and you know, we're spending a lot of money and a lot of effort to provide services to the town of Barrie, and it's not recognized, then you will have basically shot me in the face. That would be a very bad outcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hobson. That's all my questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Kungl. I thought we were at the county there for a second, wondering who's subsidizing who. Councillor McCann, go ahead.
Was that my introduction, Blaine, the laughter? Or?
No, it's just the who's zooming who. I thought it was a great comment.
You're just projecting, Councillor McCann. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Morales. Listen, I got to go for an appointment at 8:30, so I'm going to be quick, but I'm just wanting to make clarification that this will come to general committee, then to council before any final decisions will be made. Can I have the clarification, please, Chair
Yes,
Morales?
yes, Councillor McCann. If any motions are moved forward and if it passes, it then goes to general committee and then gets ratified at city council. So my only question to Ms. Cook is, if motions are introduced and the motions fail, do members of general committee have an opportunity to retable this, Ms. Cook?
Through you, Chair Morales, to the committee, yes, they will. They can bring an item for discussion forward at a general committee if they would like. Any motions that are passed from this evening will be considered by general committee on October 19th and then move forward. If they move forward, would go to council on October 26th.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ms. Cook. I'm going to do one final roll call, just understanding times going forward, and Councillor McCann's got an appointment.
Councilor Morales, I've got more questions.
Oh, you do have more questions. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll be very quick. I'm not sure if I had some technical difficulties, but I didn't know if I got a clear answer on why, Blaine, COVID has increased your cost by $400,000.
Sorry, Blaine, you're on mute.
Yeah. The original arrangements that we talked about with the town, we were talking about a general distribution of bins through the town. It would have been quite a bit bigger program. The value of that industry has been impacted. And as a result, we are looking for a smaller program, which therefore gives us less operating revenue. Therefore, I am looking for support in the renovation so that I can use our operating capital to make certain that the ND funding deficits over the next 4 years are covered and that and this thing runs smoothly.
Sorry, Blaine, I'm going to need a little different angle. You're saying that right now that your capital costs are the same, but your operating costs have increased by $400,000, or are you using your operating of $400,000 to use on your capital costs?
Yeah, no, neither. The original conversation that we had when we presented to the town looked at a much larger bin program and therefore a much greater cash flow. And therefore, over a period of time, much larger support of the ongoing subsidy. I've now got to, and I'm not saying it will always be reduced, but I am using it based on our current environment, which is substantially reduced from where it was. Therefore, it reduces the cash flow. Therefore, it increases effectively opens a hole in the whole budget. Does that make sense?
You know what, Blaine, it's a little murky, but you know what, because of time, because I'm going to be able to ask you this question again, and maybe we can talk offline, I do want to go further down that rabbit hole. If what you're saying is because of COVID, people aren't buying clothing, then that makes sense to me. But if you're not saying that, then let's pick that up maybe one-on-one, so I'm not taking up the time of council, okay?
Sure.
Second question I have is, you've talked about talking about an arrangement. You keep on saying arrangement for this $400,000. Mayor Lehman talked about a loan or a loan or a I can't read my own writing here, or a grant. Have you figured that out, or is that still in negotiation right now?
You know, in discussion with several members of council, there was a ask that we attempt to be creative in this, and then so we are prepared to do this as a second mortgage, as a loan, and we are prepared to do it in a way by which, if we are able to get provincial funding, that we would use that provincial funding to retire that loan.
Okay.
So.
That sounds better than I thought. Last maybe question I have is, are you looking at having your establishment in the downtown core of Barrie?
Not in the downtown core, no.
Great. I just maybe want to leave the meeting by maybe making a few comments. Chair Morales, if you mind, for 2 minutes.
Go ahead.
You know, I had the great pleasure. I know Councillor Natalie Harris has done the most heavy lifting when it comes to this project, and I'm sure Blaine would agree with that. And Miss Harris, Councilor Harris asked me to come into a meeting, and I had the great pleasure of actually meeting Blaine. And Blaine's one of these guys that you sit back and say, yeah, I can get behind. And when anybody comes to council or comes to me for a loan privately or a business partnership, you know, there's really three principles that I look for: is the quality of the people, you know, the quality of the process, and the quality of the product and service. And I just want to tell council who have maybe not had the pleasure to meet Blaine or talk to Blaine that Blaine is top shelf in all regards. So, I mean, the $400,000 obviously is something that I'm not going to let go without a scrap. If it makes sense for the city of Barrie, then I'm all for it, but I definitely need more information. The process, Blaine has done an outstanding job in previous locations. And I've had many conversations with Councilor Natalie Harris, with Jim Harris, with Robert Thompson, you know, Gary Harvey. I mean, quite a few councillors about the process, Blaine's, and it's just top shelf once again. And obviously, the product and service is much needed. So I'm going to have to say goodbye, Blaine, and the rest of the council. I wish I could stay for the rest of the meeting, but unfortunately, I can't. Thank you. And thank you, Blaine.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor McCann. Councillor Alwyn, I'm going to go to Councillor Thompson first. He had his card up, and then Councillor Alwyn, I'll go to you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Hobson. If things went as planned, what kind of turnaround time would we be looking at? And before you answer that, I just wanted to thank Peter for being there, and your presentation was great.
Well, it's very, 10 minutes is a lot to try and pack that in, but our timing is that we believe that we would be open for our first inpatient by August. There is some renovation on either site that needs to be done. There are some issues that have to be dealt with around security, particularly with a women's facility, and they're going to have to be dealt with, and privacy. And so there are some construction issues that need to be dealt with. I have been talking to the town, building department, zoning department, briefly. I don't want to give anyone the impression this is way advanced. It's not. But we have had some discussions, and so our target is August 1st.
Perfect. Thanks so much for all the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Alwyn, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Morales, and thank you, Mr. Hobson, for the presentation. Very intriguing stuff. So I wanted to ask about the success statistics that you mentioned so mysteriously, that they're higher than you've ever seen before. I'm definitely curious about that and wondering if you can expand on the success rate of your program.
Oh boy. Okay. So here's where we get into, you know, I don't want to end up stepping on anybody else's toes, but the rehab industry has become a very big business, and there's a lot of very private big business professional rehabs that exist, and they charge, you know, $20,000, $30,000 for a stay. And they generally publish statistics that are just phenomenal. Somewhere between 90 and 98%. But the reality is that if you were to dig through the provincial standards, you'd find that the success rates are down in the single digits. And that is a reality. We don't publish data because we are not selling a service. As you can imagine, at $7,500 for a 3-month stay, we have waiting lists. We have a very small boat, and the ocean is full of drowning people. So we don't publish statistics because we're not out banging a gong and trying to use them as a sales tool. But I'm a really strong believer in that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And so we have a program which every 6 months, every person who's been through a program is recontacted every 6 months. And at that moment, we take a snapshot of where our community is. Now, when I say that, you know, we call them and contact them, and the numbers that I'm going to give you, when we contact them, they have to have two things. They are sober and they're either working or at school. That's what we consider a success, because it's really important that it's not just about sobriety. It's about having a life. And when we do that snapshot, if you assume that all the people we can't contact are drunk or high, and that's your worst possible scenario, we're running about 66%. That at the moment we contact them, they are sober and engaged. Now, that does not mean if they left 5 years ago that they've been sober for 5 years. That would be an impossible mission for me to track. But when we take that snapshot, now, if you just take the people that we're actually able to contact and you don't assume that all of them have gone out, and frankly, it's an overly grim assumption, because there are several of our members that have passed on, and I know they passed on sober, but we just, because it's easy and we're a very small organization, we just rule them all, can't reach them, they're in the failed column, 66%. If you add in just the people we're able to contact, we vary from about 72 to 75%. Those are phenomenal numbers. I can tell you that I've spent my life in addiction, and so we don't publish those numbers, and we don't run around and try and tell people, hey, we got the biggest numbers, so you should come here. We actually live by attraction rather than promotion. And I can tell you that we constantly have a waiting list to try and get, because we only, it's a very small boat.
I really appreciate you answering and providing those figures. That's very helpful. You had mentioned provincial standards, and one of my questions is around regulation and oversight. What is the regulation and oversight of your facility in terms of the programs you provide there?
I'm going to ask Pete to answer that one. He's Director of Programs.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the question. I also want to thank everybody for giving me the opportunity with Blaine to present this to council. I'm not sure exactly what you meant, Councillor Alwyn, regarding regulation. We are a registered charity. The staff is professionally certified, board certified. I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for in terms of regulations. If you could explain that or expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any provincial standards you have to meet? Are there provincial inspections? Is there any oversight over your organization at all from a provincial level, from a Ministry of Health level?
From the Ministry of Health, no, but from the Labor Board, yes, we've had meetings. From the local fire department, yes, we've had meetings. We've met all the criteria in those categories. We've got a 20-acre ranch out in the country that has been monitored on a regular basis. Everything from the fire code to the water, in respect to those regulations. And again, my staff are board certified, so they are answerable to the board itself.
Okay, and when you mean board certified, so the board certifies the people working. Do the people working there have credentials beyond that? I know they have lived experience, which is extremely important. But
when he says board certified, he doesn't mean our board of directors.
Okay.
It means the medical board of the medical boards. They're all certified addictions and trauma counselors.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. Thank you for the clarification.
Lived experience and educated as well. Academically speaking, we are certified.
That's great. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that clarification. I ask about the regulation and oversight because for a number of reasons. We saw a BC coroner's report about the opioid crisis where they made a number of recommendations around how to keep people who use drugs safe. And one of the main things that they looked at was regulating treatment and recommending that all treatment be regulated. But I understand that's not the case in Ontario, so it's not on you at all. But I did have another question about your treatment model. You're an abstinence-based program, from my understanding. Okay. Does that mean, do you allow participants who are receiving opioid agonist treatments such as methadone, Suboxone, hydromorphone to prevent withdrawal?
Harm reduction has a role, but in our particular facility, what we do is we work with people that want to come off methadone or Suboxone, and so we develop taper plan in conjunction with an attending physician, usually their physician, whoever prescribed the medication, and they will eventually come off. I'm working with 2 right now that are on a taper plan. With methadone, it takes a little bit longer, but yeah, eventually they will come in and they will be drug-free.
And just for clarity, we're talking about our residential facility, not our entire community. So at the community center, anybody who has a desire is welcome. We have very many people that are part of our wellness programs, very many people that are part of our Pathways program. Our job creation, they're not necessarily abstinence-based. We have people that are on methadone and Suboxone. So we don't bring them into residence because our way of life is based on abstinence. But we believe in attraction, not promotion. And you do not attract people to our way of life by telling them they can't come. And so, yes, we have a lot of people in our community that are watching what we do and put their toe in, and we get a few of them. And so, you know what? Some of those people on Suboxone are never going to be able to. They're never going to be able to be abstinence. There's just too much damage, too much trauma. But that doesn't mean that we can't help them find a life, that they can't participate in family counseling and help them to understand anger control and emotional maturity and all of the issues that are surrounded addiction. It's only in our facility that we're actually purely abstinence-based, and that's because we're a non-medical facility. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. I'm happy to hear that, that's the approach that's taken in your broader programs. But in the residential facility, is it a zero tolerance approach? What are your protocols to keep people safe, is what I'm asking, in terms of, I've heard stories of people going into treatment. It's an abstinence-based program. They're experiencing symptoms of withdrawal, and then they end up using. And then because it's an abstinence-based program with a zero tolerance policy, they're removed from the program, and that can have dangerous consequences where people end up overdosing. So I'm wondering what your protocols are around that to keep people safe.
Everyone that comes to stay with us is screened, and our assessment process is rather intense. As Blaine mentioned, we're a small boat in a big ocean, and we have to be really careful who comes to stay with us. We do have drug testing procedures that take place on a regular basis. Everybody is screened before they even come in to stay with us. As I said, the staff is well versed in everything from addiction to first aid. We do everything we can to ensure the safety and the comfort of our clients. It's the one promise that we make before we even bring them in. We find that people are much more receptive. The other thing that is worth noting is that many of the people that come to stay with us have had various attempts at recovery before. And so what we introduce is a quality of life through stage 2 recovery that's not just about getting clean and sober. It's about learning how to live once you have gotten clean and sober. And so we don't have any issues to speak of in terms of people using in the residence. They get drug screened on a regular basis, and it's done randomly every day. So, we try to do everything we can to keep everybody safe and comfortable and to protect the environment that they're getting well in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that answer. And just one last clarifying question. So if someone fails a drug test, what happens?
It
Well, let me speak.
doesn't happen very often because, as I said, the people that come to stay with us actually want to be there. If somebody wants to use, the door is open. We don't mandate that people stay with us because they have to stay with us. They stay with us because they want to stay with us. And with that thought in mind, we don't very often get anybody that wants to use while they're in treatment. If they did, we would offer them services in terms of detox. We have a pretty good relationship with RVH, the detox on Wellington Street. And if somebody needs help, that's where they go. We don't cut people loose because they're bad behavior. We understand the nature of addiction. Relapse is part of that, but it doesn't happen very often in our facility.
And to be direct, I've got 10 people in a facility. I will not put 9 of them at risk because one has decided to behave poorly. I understand. You say, well, they go out and they overdose because they got kicked out. No, they didn't. They overdosed because they were a drug addict. And let's be very, very clear. We specialize in the non-too promising. I don't get guys that are here for their first spin. By the time people come to our facility, they've got 4 or 5 rehabs under their belt. They've bankrupted their family. We get the really tough cases. We get the guys who have the gift of desperation. And you know what? I will always, unfortunately, have to ask the one to leave to protect the other 9.
Thank you, Mr. Hobson.
I hear you on that. Thank you. Peter, I appreciate the clarification around, following up with detox as well. I think
if I could just insert one thing, I would really appreciate, now several of you have come down to visit the residents, and I understand the COVID, and we do have protocols in place for that, but I would love to have you guys come down and see what we do. I'm issuing an invitation to please get together and come on down and see what we do.
I would love to.
I would rather.
Please do. It really is beautiful. I mean, the facility is, but the whole experience is really, it's pretty joyful.
No, absolutely. I'm absolutely willing to do that. And I appreciate the invitation because, when it comes to government money, we have to make sure things are evidence-based. And that's why I was asking the questions. It wasn't, an attempt to offend or anything. I'm just curious about your model. And
your questions are valid.
Sure. Yeah,
Absolutely valid.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Councillor Alwyn. Any other members of committee or council? Second call. Councillor Natalie Harris, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Morales, and thank you so much, Blaine and Peter, for your presentation and for everything that you do for the addiction community. I just had a couple questions that I thought were important to help highlight a few things. So my first question was to, I'm thinking Blaine, can you all speak to your relationship with Dr. Calvin Lankin with determining our environmental benefits in the future that will occur in Barrie when we divert these textiles from the landfill?
One of the benefits of being part of the National Association of Recyclers is that we have a relationship with university, and they've done extensive work for different municipalities to be able to determine what the impact is in terms of reduction of your tipping fees, reduction of your footprint, and reduction of your carbon emissions. And so if that's important to the town, to put that into study, that's something that we can work with the doctor in order to generate. We did do it for Markham, and it was done for Aurora, I believe, as well.
That's great. The next question is your program open to all sexual and gender identities?
We're absolutely safe space.
Wonderful. Sorry, my questions are all over this page right here. I'm not sure how to form this in a question. I'm just going to go out on a limb and make this. Okay, let me think about it. Who else I can make it a question. Who else was working with me to bring this to Barry's attention? Who is the amazing community member whose first name is Mark that I really would like to address during this presentation as well, because I definitely think it is so important to share that we would all not be sitting here right now if this amazing community member did not bring Cornerstone to my attention. Peter or Blaine can answer.
Go ahead, Peter. This was your.
I'm not sure how that question came out, Natalie, but let me take a stab at it. I had the pleasure of meeting Mark on several occasions, and I can tell you that he is very passionate about what we do. And I was very pleased that the introduction, as a matter of fact, if my recollection is right, came via Brian Irving over at RVH at the Detox. And for those that I was on staff at RVH for 3 years, and that's how Brian and I got to know each other, and that's why we still have a close relationship today. But Mark was instrumental in introducing and joining the city of Barrie with Cornerstone, and it was a terrific match, and I very much appreciate Mark's input and his ideas. I don't know whether I answered your question or not.
You did.
Okay.
Thank you. Mark Cohen, amazing community member and fellow advocate. That's awesome. I'm also going to phrase this in a question. True or false? Does this proposal address the following strategic priorities for the city of Barrie? Growing our economy, fostering a safe and healthy city, and offering innovative and citizen-driven services? And the answer rhymes with Rue.
Yeah, I got to say, I think that we hit all three of those initiatives.
Yes. Absolutely. I think it's very exciting that we hit 3 of the 5 of our strategic priorities, which is pretty exciting. Okay, please hold 1 second. No, that's the same one. Oh, my question is for Peter. Peter, what is your experience with being a director at Cornerstone, and why is it so important for us to bring this to our community here in Barrie?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question, Natalie, because you know that I live in Barrie, and
Right.
I'm rather passionate about what I do. I have been in the field for 28 years now. In a variety of things. As I said, I worked at RVH. I was in private practice for a while. I wrote programs for treatment facilities, which is how I got to meet Blaine and got connected with Cornerstone. You know, one of the things that I have a soft spot for addicts in general, but there are just not enough resources available for women, and it drives me crazy sometimes. And the opportunity to come to Barrie in my own backyard and help develop something and get it off the ground and grow it. Blaine's already mentioned the community center and the idea of building a Mensa. You know, we've got a lot of work to do, and the idea of doing it here in Barrie is just a terrific opportunity that I'm very passionate about.
That's great. And I have only one more question. This question is to staff. Do we have any other treatment centers with a $3 million capital and a plan to divert waste and decrease our carbon footprints? Also ready to address the previous deaths due to opioid overdoses that Barrie experienced from 2017 to 2019, which was a number of 93. Do we have any other treatment centers on our doorstep, knocking on the door, waiting to get this rolling as we speak right now? Anyone can answer that.
If it's a yes, I'm going to really be shocked.
Mr. Proust, we'll start with you, and you can punt it down.
Thank you, Chair Morales. I was going to tell you 12 and watch for Councillor Harris's reaction, because I don't think that's the answer she's actually looking for.
I knew about 11.
I believe the question was more rhetorical than requiring a direct answer. I would say in the aspect of fairness, those types of services would typically come through the county, and they wouldn't come to the city of Barrie directly. So this is a fairly unique situation and opportunity. Hopefully that will suffice, Councillor Harris.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's great. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Councillor Natalie Harris. Okay. Unless I see any Council. Okay. Councillor Gary Harvey. Go ahead.
There's just one question that I just want to clear up while we're still in a public domain that came up through this, and it's to do with the RFP when it comes to the clothing donation bins. I'm really not understanding, like, I mean, I would only assume that these bins belong to Cornerstone, so I'm not quite sure why the city would be involved in an RFP process with bins that they would own. I don't know if Mr. Hobson wants to correct me that the bins would be owned by both, but I'm just really missing that piece of it. And obviously I think it's important for the public too, because sometimes when you do sole source, that does cause a bit of an issue publicly. So I think it's important to clarify that.
Well, the clarification on terms of ownership, certainly we would own the collection system. In the city of Markham, Aurora, Newmarket, those bins, we own them, but they are branded by the city and we operate the clothing system for them. So it does require an RFP. My understanding in your particular case, since we're not entering into a contract with you, I'm not certain what sole source we're actually talking about here, because there is no contract that we're entering into with you. We are simply looking for permits for 6 or 8 of your town sites. Now, I understand you have a bylaw that prevents recycling bins. And so now you're into an area I have absolutely no understanding of. And so I think that question needs to be asked internally.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Mayor Lehman, I saw your hand up. I think this is very similar to Councillor Ramos' question that we'll get clarity from.
And a totally legitimate question. No, we're not the proposal is not to contract a service here. It is to permit, though, Cornerstone to be the only organization that can place clothing bins. And the distinction here, Councillor Harvey, is really unusual. We're in a strange situation because in the city of Barrie, we banned these bins. So many other towns, you've got 10 different organizations that put bins all over the place. In Barrie, there are none because we made them against the zoning bylaw. So what we are talking about in terms of sole source is not actually sole sourcing a contract, but it's really granting a monopoly, which is that Cornerstone would be the only organization allowed to put out bins for clothing donations, and that we would actually be the host of those bins, say at rec centers or other appropriate locations as determined by staff. So it's a bit unusual. I mean, obviously there's a different arrangement in York Region with Markham and Aurora and others. In our case, they could just do this, except for, like, they could just set up bins today and start collecting clothes and gain the revenues, except we don't allow anybody to put them out. So the question in front of council is really whether or not we allow Cornerstone to do that.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Councillor Harvey, does that answer your question?
For the most part, but it sounds like it'll be a much lengthier discussion down the road when we get into the finer details of what this is moving forward, I would assume. I'll leave it at that for now, though.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any other member of council? Going once, going twice. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Hobson, for the presentation, and Mr. Brewood as well. We appreciate your time here on the committee. I've talked with the city clerk. I know Mayor Lehman referred earlier to waiting till the referred items. There's no reason why we can't, and actually I checked, there's no procedure reason why we can't address the 4.2 right away and then go to the presentation by Chief Mainprize. So unless there's any objection from members of committee that we stick to the order and go to the chief and then come back to this, I don't see any objections. Okay, we're going to address the referred item. So we're hopping to 4.2. The second item that was referred by General Committee on September 28th, 2020, concerning the memorandum from S. Brunette, Manager of Business Performance and Environmental Sustainability, dated September 28th, 2020, regarding the clothing textiles curbside collection pilot program. Are there any motions with this referred item? Mayor Lehman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll move the following motion. Number one, that Cornerstone's proposed women's residential treatment center to be located in the city of Barrie be endorsed, as it will serve an important component in the battle against opioid addiction. Two, that staff and corporate facilities enter into an agreement for a period of 2 years with a further 2-year option to renew with Cornerstone to place clothing bins at city facilities or at mutually agreed upon locations on public lands for the sole purpose of funding their residential recovery services. Happy to read it again and speak to it if anyone needs it.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Ms. Cook, do I have to procedurally just read it again as if we're a general committee or council?
No, Chairman Wallace.
Okay, perfect. So I'll let it stand. If any members need clarification as discussion goes on, feel free to ask. Are there any questions from member of committee first, and then I'll move on to members of council?
Can I speak to the motion, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Mayor Lehman.
Thank you. So the guts of this is straightforward. I hopefully over the course of the last hour, you've gotten a sense of just how unique, experienced, passionate, and well-established Cornerstone is. We all know the severity of the opioid crisis. I'm not going to give a speech about the need for treatment. I think Mr. Hobson made it very clear in his presentation, both why it's important, why a women's facility is particularly important. We have the 3rd highest rate of opioid poisoning in Ontario. And while I think as a council, we have made a good effort with the staff report that was introduced a year ago with naloxone on fire trucks and so forth, we have not committed any significant dollars to the fight against opioids. In addition to the delivery of the services that we already deliver. So the guts of this is straightforward. The first paragraph is a motion endorsing the project, which I feel is important for us as a statement of council's support ultimately for the project, which will assist in pursuing other funding. And then the second piece is a 2-year agreement to allow Cornerstone alone, to place bins. It is not a contract with the city, but rather an agreement. It is an agreement to allow them to place bins at mutually agreed locations. I think speaking to that piece, Mr. Chair, I will be happy to stand up in front of any resident of the city of Barrie and justify why an organization coming forward to fund a women's residential treatment facility for opioids is a justification for a sole source type of arrangement as compared to any other provider. I think this is actually a relatively simple decision, if I might, members of committee. We have this organization in front of us willing to make a $3 million philanthropic investment in building a women's recovery facility in Barrie. What they require of us is the knowledge that they can use this incredible social enterprise model that they've built to fund their services. I think it's refreshing to have an organization, a registered charity in front of us that has a sustainable operating model, that have been doing this for nearly 20 years with the funding that they generate by their own participants, collecting clothing from bins. It's a truly incredible and unique story. Because he's not here, I'll completely agree with him. Councillor McCann is completely right. Blaine Hobson is the real deal. The organization is the real deal. And having toured their facility in Kettleby and met Peter, met some of the participants, toured the clubhouse facility, I'm absolutely compelled that we should be doing everything we can to bring this facility to Barrie. Not just because the need is great, not just because they are unique, but because if we needed another reason than that, I actually believe it is going to reduce the pressure on our own emergency services. I mean, if I had to make a dollars and cents business case for this, and I know we're going to talk about the capital piece as well, you know, the reduction in pressure on all 3 emergency services that will result from 20 people who are currently struggling with addiction moving into a residential facility is non-insignificant. Add on top of that the value of the diversion of textiles, which has an environmental benefit, and you've got a double benefit. Add to that the employment generated through the social enterprise. So I have, since first visiting the facility, been immensely compelled that this could be a huge win for us in bringing a badly needed treatment facility to Barrie. As I say, speaking to the motion that's on the floor, it's not a sole source contract, but it is. It has the characteristic of granting a monopoly. So we are allowing a single organization where otherwise we might go out to allow others to bid. And I would have no problem whatsoever standing in front of anybody and saying that we did this as a sole source arrangement because it was justified, unique, and badly needed for the city. So I'll leave my comments there, Mr. Chair.
You're muted.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Councillor Thompson, I saw your card go up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting this motion. I just, look, this wasn't just an overnight thing. That I think that we should also recognize Mayor Lehman's been working on this, with Councillor Harris, and I would gladly stand at the door of any resident that with them. So I will be in support, and I think it's good for our city.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Anybody else wish to share any comments? Do I see anything? Nope. Going once, going, oh, Councillor Harvey, go ahead.
I'm just going to basically echo very similar sentiments as the two previous speakers. I think this is a no-brainer. We've seen many people in front of us before that we've got many questions when it comes to a business perspective, whereas these guys have got an extensive track record that not one person questioned their business plan or their track record of being able to operate a not-for-profit organization without any government money coming to them until obviously there was some discussion of it earlier. And even today, I was in, myself and Councillor Kungl as members of the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit Board were in receipt of an email from Dr. Simon showing some of the statistics when it comes to opioid overdoses in our area, and how Barrie is topping the list in the province, and obviously here in Simcoe and Muskoka. So this is a no-brainer, and I would hope the rest of the members around the table would support this also.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any other members of committee? Now council, go ahead, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Obviously, I can't vote on this, so I'll save any comments about it for general committee, but I do have a question for the mover of the motion. How do you see this fitting into the larger picture of the opioid strategy in Barrie? I have a feeling that some may point to this and say, look, we're doing this treatment facility. Who needs a supervised consumption site? So I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to that piece.
Well, I think they're two entirely different things, Councillor Owen. So, I think you can be in support or opposed to a supervised consumption site and be heartily in support of treatment. So I would hope that anybody viewing the opioid crisis would understand that there's a broad range of elements to this that are required. And I think the SMOS strategy that's in play in Simcoe County has 5 pillars, and treatment is one. I think my feeling on many of the efforts that we have made as a city and that are being made elsewhere are treating the symptoms. One of the most compelling parts of what I heard tonight was Mr. Hobson talking about the root causes of addiction, building a community that lasts over years to help people permanently beat their addictions. And I think that's such an essential element of a broader strategy.
Thank you for that answer. And absolutely, if you look at the evidence, it's clear there's a need. for both. And it wouldn't make much sense to look at the evidence around treatment, say, yes, we're good for that, and look at the evidence around safe, supervised consumption and say, no, we don't believe that evidence. So I'm glad to hear that there's a recognition that these different services are needed in the community. A second question, when this comes to general committee, will we have a full business plan from this organization on what they're proposing?
Is that directed to Mayor Lehman, Councillor Alwyn? Because we're
as the mover, potentially, if he knows.
So thanks for the question, Councillor Owen. We have not requested an additional business case beyond what's in front of you tonight. I think if the term, I've struggled a bit when we've talked about the term business case over the last year, because it seems to be different things to different people. I remember us struggling to define a business case about a year ago with another organization. Usually when people say business case, what they're saying is what's the return on investment, and they're really looking for what's the benefit of the investment that's being made, either in dollar terms or in this case, permitting a service as well as dollars. I guess I would say to you that we have not asked that of Cornerstone. I don't know if Councillor Harris has ever asked that of Cornerstone, but my response to it would be that if the reason for the question is what is the return on investment, whether it's $400,000 or otherwise, it is my belief that the benefits in terms of the savings to emergency services, the savings to obviously to our hospital and the healthcare sector, and the benefits in terms of textile diversion would quickly return an amount like $400,000 in probably a matter of years. There's probably some more nuts and bolts here around a residential building that will now be occupied and paying property taxes and those sorts of dollars and cents. But I think at the core of this is a proposal that says 20 treatment facilities or beds of 14 treatment beds and 6 transitional apartments is a big benefit in terms of providing proper facilities for people who are otherwise using in the streets, using in the community, ill-housed or homeless, and therefore requiring a whole lot of other services and putting pressure on other services. So that to me is the guts of the business case. We have not asked for these numbers to be quantified, though, Councillor Owen.
Okay, thank you. I can appreciate that, and I mean, maybe it's something we should ask for. We've asked for a full business case for asks that are a tenth of the size. I guess we're not doing the $400,000 that's on the table, is it? Just to
no, the motion as printed, it just speaks to point 1 and 2 about the bins, Councillor Alwyn, and supporting them. So any other questions of members of council?
I think Councillor Alwyn is frozen, so just wait till he re-engages in case he had another question.
I'll wait. Councillor Jim Harris, was that a sign after? Okay. Oh.
I'm back. Sorry, it cut out for some reason. Sorry, I'd asked for clarification whether the $400,000 was on the table.
It is not.
It's not. Okay, I appreciate that.
Councillor Jim Harris, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just maybe to follow up on that point, I think one of the important distinctions is the efforts around not-for-profits and charities is sustainability. And for kind of organizations in their infancy who are just starting out, they have no track record. And the biggest challenge when you front money for them is, will they be able to sustain themselves after that initial kind of seed funding is granted? I think what we're seeing here is not somebody who wants to seed their startup. They have a track record and they're able to sustain themselves. What they want is capital funds for a renovation. So I think it's a very different circumstance. And maybe a question through you, Chair, to the mover. 2 years, Mayor Lehman, is that enough? Given an August start, would you be interested in maybe going 3 years to help with kind of giving a bit more time for the textile to take hold?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Harris. And I do understand there's a separate motion to discuss the matter of the $400,000. I don't want anybody on the committee to believe that I've intentionally left that off. There, I believe there's a separate motion coming forward on this on the 400,000, but the motion that's on the floor is just on the textile piece and the project. To answer your question, Jim, that's why I did the 2 with the option for 2 more. I think actually Mr. Hobson and Cornerstone are proposing a 4-year commitment in terms of subsidizing treatment and supporting treatment in our community. So I wanted to match that. But the 2 years gives us the opportunity to say, is this working for both of us?
Okay, thank you. I'm fine with that. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Do you have any other questions? No, you're good. Okay. Any other members of council? Okay, so as printed, we have the motion on the floor, section 1, that Cornerstone's residential proposed women's residential treatment center to be located in the city of Barrie be endorsed as it serves an important component in the battle against opioids. And number 2, that staff and corporate facilities enter into a sole source agreement for a period of 2 years with Cornerstone Residential to place clothing bins at city facilities or at mutually agreed upon locations on public lands for the sole purpose of funding their residential recovery services. Seeing no further, go ahead, Mayor Lehman.
Sorry, Councillor Morales, there's a key piece that was missing. I added the clause with an option to renew for 2 more years.
With an option to,
I don't think, I think you may have read the earlier version. Yeah, thank you.
Correct. I have the 655 version with the, so 2 plus 2 with a player to be named later. Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, I'm going to move to a vote. And I feel your struggle, Mayor Lehman. If you vote yes, please hold it as I scan through the grid, and then we'll do that. So all those in favor, please vote yes. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Councillor Alwyn, can I get your screen as blank?
I don't vote. I'm not a member of the committee.
Oh, you're not a member of the committee.
Thanks, though. I mean, I could have just slid under the radar and voted.
You wouldn't have gotten past Ms. Cook, but thank you for that. So I have 5 yeses myself, so that passes. Thank you. And okay, so that takes care of the motion. Are there any other motions to be introduced? I saw Councillor Deputy Mayor Ward first, and then Councillor Thompson.
It's not to do with this matter, but I know we still have another presentation tonight. I wonder if we could agree now that the noise one will not be done tonight. I don't think we're going to get time to discuss it. I don't want to start discussing it really late. I'd love to get I don't want to feel like the fire presentation we're afraid to ask questions because we're in such a hurry. The great thing about noise bylaw, it's a summer thing. And so if we want to postpone it to the next meeting, I think I'm okay with that. So I'll ask the chair what he prefers, but I just think it's getting late and I don't want to have that hanging over our head knowing we've still got that discussion going to come.
So Deputy Mayor Ward, you'd recommend deferring 4.1 to the next committee meeting, but still doing the first responders presentation, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I have no problem with that either. Do I see any objections? Yes, 1 objection from Councillor Thompson. I can't hear.
Sorry, I'm in support of it. I vote yes for Barry's motion.
I can hear it in your voice. Okay, so we have deferred. Seeing no objections, we've deferred 4.1 to the next meeting. Are there any other motions, Councillor Thompson?
Through you, Chair, I have a motion.
Go ahead.
Thank you. That the City of Barrie provide an interest-free loan in the amount of $400,000 to Cornerstone 2 Recovery to be funded from the Community Benefit Reserve for the purpose of renovation of a building to operate a women's residential addiction recovery facility in Barrie, and that the loan be secured against the building and be repaid in equal installments beginning in 2021 over a 20-year period. 2, that Cornerstone Recovery 2 Recovery make best efforts to pursue funding opportunities and if secure, repay any outstanding loan payments to the city upon receipt of the funding. And I can speak to that.
Go ahead and speak to that, Councillor Thompson. By the way, we now have 61 lines of services. Financier, go ahead.
What, pardon?
That was a joke. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. So I know that some of the councillors had met with Blaine and Cornerstone, and one of the most attractive things was that it was self-sustainable. There was no government ask, and that was a model that a lot of councillors were really in support of. And then in light of the changing world, that things are a little bit different, and they've run up short a little bit. So I just felt that they're looking to invest in us, and I just think that it'd be right if we invest in them. And we've come to an agreement that they're comfortable, like in conversation, that this is a path that they would be willing to take and to invest in our city, and that's why I've put the motion forward.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any members of the committee have any questions, comments on this? I'm scanning and my internet's getting slow. I don't know who went first. I'm going to go Councillor Harvey, then Deputy Mayor Ward. Okay.
I will definitely support this. I know when there was some earlier thoughts around a $400,000 grant, I was very reluctant on that. However, I am glad that the discussions went this route. And also too, I think it sets the landscape for future asks coming to the city, because it seems like in the last year and a half, every time we turn around, there's different organizations that are coming and asking for money. And I think this sets a good precedent moving forward, that we're here to partner with you, but we're also not an open checkbook either. And I know this exact scenario has taken place in another municipality when it came to them setting up a makerspace themselves. And I know, like earlier, we had the Bricks come and do presentations in regards to that. So I'm 110% supportive of moving in this direction, as I think it's the way to support a really good community-driven effort by a not-for-profit organization that's going to solve a significant issue in our city, but also too, it adds us as a good partner, and a partner that in the end is really not costing the taxpayers a whole lot of money.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Deputy Mayor Ward.
Thank you, Chair Morales. And through you to Councillor Thompson. Have we run this by Cornerstone? I'm just curious whether it's something they're interested in doing, or before we ask this. Thanks.
For you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. I had some conversation, and also Mayor Lehman had spoke with Blaine. And to be honest, we didn't guarantee anything. That we said that, that some councillors had a little bit of a concern with the ask, that we would discuss it here and stuff. And they said that they'd probably be able to work it in with their budget. And so, yes, the long answer to that question is that, but the short one is yes.
Okay. And the second part is, have we run it past staff to make sure this is something we can do?
Mayor Lehman.
Sir, I'll field that only because I was working with Councillor Thompson on the motion. Yeah, I talked to the treasurer. A loan is possible. To your opening remark there, Mr. Chair, it is unusual. I mean, when the hospital, which is a healthcare facility, wanted funding from the city, we gave them $52.5 million in cash. We did not do a loan, but it was a payment spread out over time. And of course, we have had similar arrangements with Georgian College over the years for much larger amounts than this. Of course, add zeros. So for a $400,000 amount, I think, I was going to propose a grant. I know that some members of council are far more comfortable with a loan, and there is the potential that this facility could receive additional funding, in which case Cornerstone would pay back immediately. So I spoke with the treasurer this morning, sent him an email. Yes, a loan can be worked out. He specified that it was important that council set the term and whether there would be interest. And any other conditions associated. And of course, that is that they use it exclusively for a women's residential treatment facility, and that it be secured against the building. Now, that it may not be secured in first position, but I don't think that should matter to council given the circumstances.
Okay, thank you. One other request is that, can I have the motion read again before we vote on it? Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Thompson, do you want to read the motion?
Sure. Get the guy who doesn't really like to speak on camera, read it twice.
I'll read it for you.
No, motion. That the city of Barrie provide an interest-free loan in the amount of $400,000 to Cornerstone to Recovery to be funded from the Community Benefit Reserve for the purpose of renovation a building to operate a woman's residential addiction recovery facility in Barrie, and that the loan be secured against the building and be repaid in equal installments beginning in 2021 over a 20-year period. 2, that Cornerstone to Recovery make best efforts to pursue funding opportunities, and if secured, repay any outstanding loan payments to the city upon receipt of funding. One more time.
No. Mayor Ward is good. Any further? No, Deputy Mayor Ward? Okay, we're good. Thank you. Any other member of committee have any questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll just provide a couple comments. Mayor Lehman, thank you that you understood my joke there, the 60+1 lines of services that we offer. And it was a huge compliment to your motion, Councillor Thompson, my joke. The compliment is the line that says that the loan be secured against the building. You just made us a mortgage firm, which is awesome. And why that is awesome is because you are holding our tax dollars accountable in the sense of by providing this as a loan, and we're securing it against the building. We're not mortgaging the building per se, but it's almost like a lien on the property that gives accountability and essentially makes, puts us in line with the success that the Cornerstone is going to have. It's striking that great balance between giving a grant and giving a loan with accountability that also allows us to, again, have that $400,000 be accountable to our taxpayers. So that line, you are to be commended, and any staff that possibly helped you out is to be commended, because it definitely gives me a level of security with that. Just the final comments that I'll make on this, because I did ask this question of the Busby Center last year, so I want to remain consistent. Who do we have here? Mr. Prowse, if you're on the line, as they move forward with this, can we just ensure that any leasehold improvements that they do, any major ones, obviously you can't find a space and tell the building owner, I want my paint back at the end of the lease, but anything major such as an HVAC system or anything that could that has those implications, could we direct Cornerstone to have those conversations and make sure expectations are clear before they sign a lease, so there's no surprises later? And I just bring that up because I asked that question at the Busby Center about a year and a half ago, and I just want to be consistent on that.
Through you, Chair Morales, I guess to you, Chair Morales. It's my understanding from the presentation that Cornerstone intends to purchase the property, not to be leasing it. So any improvements would be done to their own property, and I guess by extension would potentially be enhancing our asset.
Perfect. So both properties that they're looking at are both for purchase, not one for purchase and one for lease, right?
That's my understanding, but I haven't worked with them directly on the property.
Perfect. That answers that question. Thank you. Okay, and those are all my comments. The motion's on the floor as was read by Councillor Thompson. So I'm going to move it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please indicate. Myself as well. Any opposed? None. The motion carries. Okay, perfect. Members of committee, are there any other motions coming forward out of this meeting? Nope. Okay, so the motions will now go to general committee, and after that we'll go to city council. So thank you everybody who was a part of this, and we will now move on to presentation 2.1. The presentation being presented by Fire Chief Corey Mainprice concerning the 2019 Barrie Fire and Emergency Services Annual Report. And I'll call upon the chief. Thank you for your patience, and you have the floor to give us a presentation.
Great, thank you, Chair Morales. I'm just going to share my screen to confirm that everyone's able to see it.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect, great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Lehman, members of council, senior staff, and any guests joining us via the live stream. On behalf of Barrie Fire and Emergency Services, I'm proud to present our 2019 annual report. Every day, our dedicated team of fire service professionals deliver exceptional fire protection services to our community. This report highlights the tremendous work of our staff and delivers a comprehensive analysis of the professional services we offer to our residents. Our 2019 report will provide an overview of our department's vision, mission, and values, our organizational structure, department profile, financial overview, and highlights from each branch. Additionally, we will review our plans moving forward, including many of our staff achievements. Our City Council is critical to ensuring DFES can maintain essential fire protection service to meet the expectations of our community. The highlights and achievements detailed in this report are a direct result of your continued commitment to public safety and support of our team at DFES. On behalf of the 187 members of our team, thank you in advance. Some of our 2019 highlights include dispatching over 22,000 emergency calls in less than 60 seconds, 98% of the time, to 20 different municipalities. Responding to over 8,300 emergency incidents in less than 6-minute travel time, 91% of the time. Proactively visiting over 10,000 single-family homes to complete home safety inspections by our operations group, and completing over 2,800 fire inspections and reviewing over 450 building permits. Underpinned by our mission, vision, and values, our team is committed to providing a proactive and efficient fire service that delivers public education, prevention, code enforcement, and incident response. Our department is structured to support these statements, and we are measuring our actions to ensure they remain the focus of our decisions. Not listed in these statements are 3 additional goals DFES has embraced as we continue to move our organization forward. Be proactive, measure your performance, and make data-driven decisions. Collecting and using local data has been an important part of our decision-making process. We will review examples as we move into the details of the report. Our BFES team consists of 187 staff members distributed across 5 branches to provide uninterrupted emergency services every day. Our department branches include administration, operations, fire prevention and public education, communications, and training. Our administration oversees all our day-to-day operations, including the long-range strategic planning, financial management, procurement, contract, and emergency management. Operations is our frontline firefighting personnel responsible to mitigate emergencies. You will see further in the report how this branch has an increasing role in public education and fire prevention initiatives. Fire prevention and public education are responsible for all our code enforcement, fire prevention, plans review, and public education programs. Our communication staff provide emergency call taking and dispatching services for the City of Barrie and 19 other partner municipalities, which include 54 fire stations. Our training branch develops, oversees, and provides training to our operations staff. All of our branches work collectively to provide comprehensive fire protection model. The BFES operating budget in 2019 was approximately $27.2 million. We generated just over $1.2 million in revenue from our contracted services, providing communications and technical rescue services to other municipalities. BFES is a people-driven service with 96.5% of our operating budget being committed to employee salaries and benefits. The remaining 3.5% is allocated to services and supplies. Our 2019 capital budget included funding to update 2 fire stations to gender neutral facilities, funding for enhanced 911 services, communications equipment, and vehicles. The snapshot on the right of the page shows several of the additional accomplishments from across several of our branches, including 415 fire station tours, 181 public presentations, 151 media interviews, 15 fire investigations, and 10 after the fire blitzes. This is a program where we target specific areas that had a fire and public education material, as many of the residents are aware of fires just recently occurred in their neighborhood. 2019 was the second year of our door-to-door home fire safety inspection program. This program is completed by our in-service operations crew who visited over 10,000 homes. Our goal is to visit every one of our approximately 40,000 single-family homes every 4 years and then start the program over again. This map shows the completed areas in 2018, 2019, and the areas scheduled to be completed in 2020. This program has generated multiple success stories with positive community feedback since it started in 2018. The SES responded to 8,330 emergency incidents in 2019, a slight decrease from our 2018 numbers. The middle chart on the left side of the page shows the types of calls for the types of incidents and total staff hours associated with each call type. The pictograph on the top left shows the breakdown of the total response time from the receipt of the call to arrival on scene. This graph shows the average and the 90th percentile time breakdown. It's broken down to include our call processing time, turnout time, crew assembly, which is the donning of PPE, entering the truck, travel time, totally calculate the total response time. The SES met the council mandated response time of less than 6 minutes of travel, 90% of the time, in excess of 90% of the time in 2019. The incident heat map on the right side of your screen demonstrates the areas of the city where you attend the greatest number of emergency incidents. The map on the left of the display shows the percentage of the actual number of percentage and the actual number of incidents that occurred in each ward. This is very consistent with our heat map from the previous slide. The map on the right displays the approximate location of the fires which reported dollar loss in 2019. The location of these fires is slightly less consistent with our heat map, but still remains consistent with previous data that shows the majority of fires, especially serious ones, occur north of the midpoint of the city. This is important information as it assists us with the development of target inspection and public education programs to reduce community risk. We are committed to improving our department and the services we offer our community. We continue to set goals for our organization to meet that commitment. Our brief overview of these goals include the implementation of a long-term sustainable mental health and wellness program, modernization of our records management system, and expanded data collection and analytics, the completion of a comprehensive citywide risk assessment, construction and authorization of our new backup communication center, targeted public education program, procurement of a long-term fire apparatus supplier, and enhancement of our fire training facility. 2019 was another year filled with staff milestones, including many new hires, promotions, retirements, and long service achievements. Many of them are noted on the right side of your screen. In 2019, Barrie Fire and Emergency Services celebrated 175 years of protecting the lives and property in our city. A long history of providing exceptional fire protection to our community is a result of the professionalism, teamwork, and leadership of our team at the FES. I want to first acknowledge every member of our team and our city partners for their commitment and compassionate service to our city. Together, we will continue to build on our knowledge and experience, rise above challenges, and provide exceptional fire protection services to our community. In closing, I'd like to thank Rebecca and her team at Corporate Communications for their assistance creating this report. They did a tremendous job organizing and displaying the information we provided, and I'm happy to take questions on the report at this time.
Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. Very much appreciated the visuals on that as well. Are there any questions from members of the committee? And yeah, same as the last presenter, Chief, if you could just help exit your screen, we'll go back to our grid. There we go. Any questions from members of committee? I just got to scan. I was on the other grid, Councillor Harvey and then Deputy Mayor Ward.
Thanks, Chief, for your presentation. I did look at it at great deal actually the other day before your presentation. This is actually something a little bit off topic, but just to show the interest in the fire service. I shared one of the posts through my Facebook in regards to your current recruitment drive that's on the go. And lo and behold, sure enough, doesn't the next day somebody get a hold of me asking me a whole slew of questions that I had no idea what the answers were to. Are you in a position where you can, like, do we know how many that you're potentially looking at hiring? Because I know the posting just says multiple, or is it, I know sometimes it can be fluid when it comes to retirements and things of that sort.
Through the chair to Councillor Harvey, thank you for your question. So our current recruitment started October 25th. Currently, we are definitely going to be recruiting at least 5. We have multiple upcoming retirements next year through a mandatory retirement of firefighters across several different divisions. You actually will probably be seeing the staff report in the near future with some potential options to accelerate some hiring for some mandatory retirements. But as of right now, it's definitely 5.
Great, thank you. And someone from my profession, always wanted to be a firefighter, but just couldn't do it. My eyes.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Deputy Mayor Ward, and I believe Mayor Lehman, you had indicated as well. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you very much for that presentation. It was a fascinating report. I also looked at it the last couple of days by looking at it. I mean, the heat map just jumps out at you. And I have to ask, I mean, there's such a concentration of calls downtown. I assume, I mean, you said the rest, it's obviously medical calls and resuscitations. You break that down, I mean, does it tie into, I mean, it has to tie into our opioid crisis that's going on right now, I assume.
Through the chair to Deputy Ward, certainly the difficult situation with respect to the number of overdoses and the opioid situation in general has increased the number of calls that we respond to within the core of the city. The downtown area has always been the busiest, not just in the last number of years with the increase in opioids, it's always been the busier section of the city. Certainly an older infrastructure, tighter packed buildings, aging structures as well. Socioeconomics are a big factor with respect to fire services. So we're seeing more of an increase than normal, but that downtown area that's highlighted in the heat map has certainly always been the busiest section of the city.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers, I mean, it's the area that's, you have 7,700 calls altogether, or staff hours, sorry, 5,900 calls. And I mean, based on the heat map, I've got to feel that the vast majority of those calls are in that one area. Is that correct?
That's correct. I would, and they don't break down exactly from ward to ward, but the area between Little Avenue and Steele Street to both the east and west borders of the city are probably responsible for 75% of our calls.
And is that reflected in the staffing? Is the station number 1 staffed at a greater level because of that?
Yes, it is. We actually made some changes to our staffing in the downtown station 2 years ago as part of a pilot program initially, which we've then solidified since then to move additional resources to the core because the frequency of calls was resulting in reliability issues of an available fire apparatus due to the significant volume in the core of the city.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think it just highlights the need for prevention. I mean, not just fire prevention, things that we were discussing earlier, like treatment for opioids and things like this, because I mean, I'm astounded at the number of calls there are. It's a real eye opener. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. As I heard the chief say many a times, most of the calls are if you could shoot a golf ball from the roof of the downtown station, right, Chief? And Ms. McAlpine?
Yeah, that's an analogy we use loosely. If we want to know where the next call is in the city of Barrie, you can hit a golf ball from the station. Not myself, but a good golfer. You hit a golf ball from the station, and it's probably going to be very close to that area. From a total incident volume, probably shockingly, on a per capita basis, the numbers in our city for a fire response are much higher than most municipalities our size. I've looked at some data recently. I look at a city like the size of Markham. They run 1,000 calls a year less than us. They're 400,000 people. The city of Vaughan runs 10,000 calls. They are over 400,000 people. So we definitely have a very high per capita incident, especially in the downtown core.
Perfect. Thank you. Mayor Lehman.
There's a lot in that, but the hour is late, so I'm just going to ask the question that's kind of related to Deputy Mayor Ward's. Chief, I mean, I'd flip you that note about the Vancouver Fire Department and the follow-ups after medical calls to try and help people break the cycle. And I think that's the kind of sustained effort that we need to make to kind of go upstream. So my question is more generally around the prevention side. And I know it's an unusual year with COVID. It changes everything, especially for an emergency service. But could you just say a little bit more? You touched on it, but could you say a little bit more on how the prevention branch is expanding what they do and using data to target what they do?
Through the chair to Mayor Lehman, one of the main purposes of collecting data is to, anecdotally, we knew for many years where the likelihood of the next serious incident will be just based on previous years, but we could never prove it. We didn't collect that data. And as we heard the previous speaker before, if you treasure it, measure it. If you can't prove it, it didn't happen. So we started to certainly collect a lot more of that data. So we knew we could prove where our challenging areas were. We did that certainly from an operational standpoint. So we could make sure we had the right resources in the right areas to mitigate reactive risk. But we certainly were using it to proactively try and mitigate risk as well, to tailor our fire prevention education programs specifically to areas with higher risk. So using the operational crews to get out door to door, to do home fire safety inspections, we prioritize the areas that we have the most incidents of fire. So when we did the initial assignments in 2018 and 2019 to dispatch our crews, we looked at the areas that had the highest significance of fire incidents. And we said, these are our priority areas to get the crews out to do the home fire safety inspection. We also use the same data with respect to our commercial inspections. We have a new program with our operations staff. We're going to be targeting high rises, commercial instructions, commercial occupancy, and low rise as well. And we'll use that same incidence of fire data to prioritize which buildings they're going to go to first.
Thanks. And I guess the comment I'd make based on that is, when you look at the heat map, yeah, of course, the core stands out. But if you look at the other areas that are lighter colors, because presumably there's more calls relative to the other areas, they're mostly the commercial nodes around the city. Bayfield Street stands out, sort of Duckworth and Cundalls, and there's a number of other spots where you wouldn't necessarily assume it's older structures or missing fire safety, because a lot of the development in the area is newer. But it does speak to those commercial sort of inspections and prevention efforts. So appreciate that answer, Chief. Thanks for that. And by the way, comment on the report. It's an excellent report. It's a similar format, I think, to last year when it was new. It's very, very strong visually, and in terms of the quality of the content, I think it shows our residents what the service is doing very, very well.
Thank you for your comments, Mayor Lehman.
Perfect. Thanks, Mayor Lehman. Councillor Thompson.
I just wanted to say thanks to the chief. Yeah, it's very insightful to see, and it was good to hear how the data is actually helping with staffing and response times and all that. And I just wanted to say it was a great report, and thanks for all the information. And if Jim Harris was hitting the golf ball, you wouldn't need trucks. They would just be at the bottom.
There you go. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other questions, comments about the presentation? Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Chair Morales. My question is, and thank you for the presentation, Chief Main Prize. If you could please just elaborate a little bit on your mental health program. I know I'm quite familiar with all of the amazing work that you've done to implement help, either with treatment for calls that are difficult, etc., but also for prevention. And I know you've been working with an amazing lady in our city to establish a really amazing model. Could you tell us about that?
Great. Through the chair to Councillor Harris, thank you for the question. Personally, it's probably one of the greatest achievements that I think is going to come to fruition within our department. As we mentioned, traditionally the fire service has only been a reactive service. A problem arises, we deal with it. We're really good at it. We're good at helping our staff. We're good at mitigating problems, but it's only ever been in a reactive nature. So starting earlier in this year, for the first time in our department, we took a lot more proactive approach. We implemented called the BOSS program, before occupational stress. So for the first time ever, we took a core group of people and we met them. They met every other week with a mental health professional as a group. Fantastic program. They actually raved about it so much. We had so much uptake that staff wanted to participate in it. Staff were actually volunteering to go through the assessments that were done with the staff who participated in it. So we took that feedback and starting 2 weeks from now, will probably be the biggest step we've ever taken with respect to mental health for our staff, not only in the city of Barrie, I'm actually going to go as far as to say in the fire service in general in Ontario. Starting 2 weeks from now, all of our staff will start to proactively meet on a mandatory wellness assessment with a mental health professional to be scheduled while they're on duty, taken off shift. It's a 3-part assessment. They'll receive feedback and any assistance that's required. So, super proud of the program. I know you're familiar with the individual who we partnered up with. The partnership between our peer support team, our association, and our management. And I think it's going to have a tremendous impact on the long-term mental health of our staff.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm supposed to comment, but I just really do want to emphasize that I am very aware of your program is really changing the whole path of what is even presented to other services in Ontario. You're leading the way, and you're really demonstrating what prevention looks like, and it's really needs to be applauded. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. We have a tremendous team, and I'm really proud of the work they're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Natalie Harris. Any other questions of members of council? I guess I'll just close it off by the $1 million question, Chief Mainprice. When will we see Ms. Dawn McAlpine rappel down City Hall again?
So Dawn is welcome to participate in any of our training evolutions. I'm not gonna lie, she's a pretty good sport. I was a little nervous that she might back out, and not only did she do it, but she volunteered to do it again so we could get better footage. So kudos to Ms. McAlpine. She's pretty courageous, and I think everything that we've asked her to participate in, from rappelling to being out in the hovercraft, and even last year she participated in the live fire out of Borden with a pack, pushing hose, and right in the fire. So she's a great sport.
Perfect. And I absolutely, Chief, that speaks to both not only continued training, but also the public relations component, communications to advertise that to the community to showcase the value. So again, Chief, thank you for the presentation. And yeah, thank you for attending City Council or the Finance and Corporate Services Committee.
Great. Thank you everyone for your time. Perfect.
Thanks, Chief. Moving on, we have the advisory committee reports, section 5. We have 3 reports to be received. Can I have a member of committee put the following advisory committee reports on the floor to be received? I'll name them first. Report of International Relations Committee, March 3rd this year. Report of Investment Board, March 11th of this year. And report of the Community Safety Wellbeing Committee dated July 6th of this year. Could I have a member of committee? Saw Councillor Gary Harvey, seconded by Councillor by Mayor Lehman. Any comments? No? All those in favor, please indicate. All in favor, as am I. Okay, perfect. None opposed. That carries. And then we have one recommendation from the report of the Community Safety Wellness Being Committee dated July 6, 2020. Draft Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. 1, that the draft Community Safety Wellbeing Plan as presented by A Way of Mass LBP on July 6, 2020 be received. And 2, that the members of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Committee contact Chief Greenwood and A Way to identify initiatives that they would like to support or co-lead to continue to support the development of the plan. And can I have a member of the committee place that motion on the floor? I saw Deputy Mayor Ward first, seconded by Councillor Harvey. Any questions? Nope, none. Okay, all those in favor? Yes, it's all around, including myself. That carries. And Ms. Cook, I believe that covers. We had a deferral. Any other remaining items on the agenda?
No, Councillor Morales.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Move to adjourn, Mayor Lehman. I support that. Okay, Councillor Thompson's in before we even vote. All those in favor? We're in favor. We are adjourned. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good job.